You may sit down, please. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. Swati Salgaonkar, Chairperson CII Western Region and President VM Salgaonkar and brother. Rajesh, my dear friends, some new, some old. Hopefully by the end of the summit, I'll make some new friends, but a lot of familiar faces. Welcome to this Western Region Summit. It's got a very interesting theme. The theme is Bold Vision, Big Impact, the next era. For those of us who have been in the startup space for some time, know that the first wave has been largely tech startups, more largely from Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, that part, and other startups which are largely trying to tap the inefficiencies in the Indian market as well as the size of the market. So this was the first wave. Now we are seeing a new wave at 100x, and this is not a commercial for 100x, but just so that you get context. Over 5 years, we have seen some very interesting trend. The first interesting trend for the next era is we are seeing a lot of startups, founders from tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns. And this percentage is only growing. Why is this happening? Because of a couple of reasons. Firstly, aspirations are rising, rightly so. There's a lot of hunger in these founders. And more interestingly, startup is now being taken as the first choice of career by a lot of young girls and boys. I remember, Rajesh, when I was Western Region Chair in 2017 and before the Maharashtra, I used to travel extensively. We had connect programs with education institutes. And in places like Kolhapur and other Nasik and other places when I traveled, in an engineering college, if I ask the girls and boys, how many of you want to become startup founders? Now, this is, let's say, 7, 8 years back, hardly 30, 40% would raise their hand. Now, if I go today, and I have been recently, there's not less than 80% girls or boys who raise their hands. And then I ask the balance 20%, why have you not raised? They say, no, we'll work for 2 years and we'll join startups. Now, you have to realize these are the aspirations of young girls and boys. Now, you may have views on that and you may have counter views on that. But the fact is, young girls and boys aspire now to join startups. So the first big trend is tier 2 and tier 3 towns and cities. There are a lot of founders. Beware, founders from tier 1 and with cushy lifestyles, they are out there. Hunger in their stride and passion in their thought process. They are here to really get into startups. So that's a big trend. The percentage of startup founders we have received from these cities and towns is quite remarkable. We have seen and funded startup founders whose parents are bricklayers, whose parents are farmers, whose parents are marginal laborers. And this is the beauty of the startup industry. So this percentage is growing a lot. The next big trend I have seen and we are seeing in the industry, let me talk not only for myself, but from the industry perspective, is the percentage of girls is now slowly increasing. It is not, of course, increasing at the pace at which we would like or even Swati would like, but it is definitely increasing. 5 years back, the percentage of girl or women-led founders who are either co-founders or founders was less than, was in single digits. And Paula has come, she's very passionate about women founders. So she'll talk more when she moderates the session. But the good news is that this percentage is gradually increasing. It has reached in our firm, we have get around 20-25% of the pitches are now by girls as founders or co-founders. It should be 50%. When it becomes 50%, Paula will tell you in her session. But the good news, over 5 years, the percentage has gone up from 7-8% to around 25-28%. That's really a great news. The next big trend is startups are now building products in India, for India, and for the world. Earlier, the whole idea was let's build startups in India. India is such a huge market. Let's capture this market. There's no other market like India. Let's get after India. Once we have captured the Indian market, let's build the global market. Why compete in the US? Why compete in Europe? They're tough markets. But these young startups now are no longer scared of competing in the global space. It has its own set of challenges, going to the US market, going to Middle East, or going to any other outside. But now founders are saying we want to build global scale startups. A combination of all these three, you'll see, is suddenly what kind of motivated us to think of this topic and theme for today: bold vision, big impact. And another interesting fact, Deepak is also here and Paula is here. Paula has been in the industry for a long time in the seed capital space. Today, if you have an idea, a good idea, a great way to implement your idea, you will get funded. There are family offices, there are angels, there are super angels, there are VCs. At every stage, you will get funded. Now, people who don't get funded get disappointed because they say, oh God, I'm not getting funded. The idea is there's enough capital to fund your brand new idea. My favorite quote, and you can put it on Twitter, but please, give my name. Capital is chasing ideas. Truly speaking, it has never happened in India ever before. Today, capital is chasing ideas. When founders come to me and say, oh, I pitched to you, I pitched to this one, I pitched that, then I know people are not understanding my idea. How come I'm not getting funded? I just remind them the global average for a pitch to get funded by a founder is 65. So if you've not pitched more, at least 65 times, don't get disappointed. You have to go on and on and on. If you believe in the idea, if you have a smart way to implement it, it is not just a vision. You have to have a great implementation plan. Vision will give you 2 minutes of mind share of VCs like Deepak and Paula, but after that, the balance 30 minutes is all about how we're going to execute. So this is the next big trend. Capital is chasing ideas. And all of this is culminating into what we are going to discuss today. We have two great panel discussions and then we'll have a fireside. The whole idea is I strongly believe startups will make a huge impact to the Indian economy. I strongly believe without a robust startup ecosystem, we will not achieve what truly India deserves of becoming a developed country. There are 2, 3 sectors which I think require more attention and we can discuss and debate during the panel discussion. One, I think, is the deep tech sector. India needs to do a lot more to attract the very best deep tech startups. A lot is happening, but a lot can increase, whether it's in terms of protection of IP or regulations. But deep tech is something which I believe is just waiting to explode. Just as Indian industry showed the world how IT industry came to India and how it became a major player in the IT sector, industry sector, deep techs can show the way as well. The other sector I feel which requires far more attention and hope to see more founders, and it will happen because we are seeing now more founders from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, is on agri-tech and more on rural tech. Majority of India's population still lives in rural areas. We are not seeing enough startups. And I'm not talking of impact startups. Impact startups are different. I'm not talking of NGOs. I'm not talking of self-help groups. I'm talking of pure play for-profit startups in both these sectors, rural tech and deep tech. I think it will happen as we go along. But for now, it's today's theme for today's summit. I want to welcome all of you. The theme is bold vision, big impact. The future is about to begin. With that, may I invite Swati to deliver her special address. Thank you. Thank you again and welcome.
Thank you, Ninad. And first of all, I think, congratulations for conceptualizing today. I think, at CII, we talk a lot about engaging with startups, but I think for the Western region, this really is a first. And I think Ninad has really been driving this agenda for the last couple of years. So thank you. And and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I can see a lot of founders, a lot of investors in the audience, and I think it's a great platform that we have today. I think my experience with startups has been in a few different areas. One is as an investor, and many times founders ask me, what do you think are kind of sectors we should be looking at, or what's sort of going to be the next big thing in India. And honestly, I think the one thing I always say to them is don't just look at areas that are sort of sexy or glamorous. I think India has enough fintech startups. We have enough e-commerce, quick commerce startups, but there are a lot of real problems that we need to solve in India. And as Ninad mentioned, there's a lot of rural population. There's a lot happening in tier two, tier three cities and towns. Real needs that need to be addressed. If you look at where India wants to head in the next, 15, 20, 30 years, whether we're talking about renewable energy, whether we're talking about healthcare, I think, these are great areas. And of course, I think skilling and education remains a large part of this. And I think this is something even at CII, we've been working very closely with academic institutions to really see how can we align what industry needs with, what India needs. And I think if we are talking about a kind of a tech future, we do really need that skill set coming out of our universities and colleges. So something CI has been working on for many years now. We call it the Corporate Startup Connect, and we're really seeing how legacy industry can engage with startups and entrepreneurs. Often there's, a kind of hesitation on both sides. I think, industry is set in its ways. Startups, are trying to disrupt, do something different, and they can't always, find a kind of a common ground. And I think funding is now, there's a lot of funding available. There's a lot more access to funding. But what we find really is lacking is, kind of mentorship. A lot of startups are looking for, opportunities to pilot, access to supply chains or customers, looking for product market fit validation. Sometimes they don't know enough about an industry. They may have a solution, but they're not necessarily sure how they can really address that. And that's really what we're trying to do at CII, is create platforms, and opportunities like today, to really create, that bridge between startups and corporates, our members. And I think there is a lot to be said about cross pollination. I think if you look at how the world is, going today, you like I one of our part of our family business is mining, and we look at the impact of chemistry and biochemistry and biology and synthetic biology in mining now. So I think something we didn't necessarily think were related fields a few years ago. CI also has a center of excellence for startups and innovation that's based out of Hyderabad now. So, we are working on various initiatives. But I think where we'd also like to do more work is, almost looking at startups to, as an outsourcing opportunity of research and development for our members. Because a lot of times I think, large corporates think in a certain way, move in a certain way, and startups aren't bound by any of those prejudices or rules. So if you really look at a lot of, the kind of new innovation does come out of startups. And of course, then, that helps industry at large. Another topic, I think that's close to my heart that Ninad touched upon is women entrepreneurs and women, startup founders. And to that, we've, been working on two initiatives at the Western region. One is our Emerging Women Leaders program. So we're really looking at women in the sort of age group, of 25 to 35, giving them, some exposure, industry connects, and helping them really kind of realize their potential as leaders. And the other one is one that was launched this year, which is called Spark, which deals with women in STEM fields. and we're looking at it holistically, right from education to when they enter the corporate world, whether they want to be entrepreneurs, whether they want to work for a large company, and how do they, right from recruitment to kind of retention, if they want to re-enter the workforce. So this is something that we've been spending a lot of time and energy on. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the education and skilling piece is really key, and this is how we're sort of working with women to increase that proportion. I think personally, as I mentioned, one is my involvement with startups has been on the as an investor, but as a company as well. This ties into my earlier thought where I said, there are a lot of kind of unglamorous sectors and sort of unglamorous problems to be solved. And coming from the mining industry, that's really something that we were looking at very closely, because it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry worldwide, but there's really not been much innovation in the last few decades. Things are still being sort of done the same way. It's a fairly boring industry, so it doesn't attract much attention from startups. And what we did was we actually launched a global accelerator program. Originally, the idea was to do it for startups in India, but unfortunately, we couldn't find the enough startups in India, which I think also speaks to what I was saying earlier, that there are real problems to be solved. And I think this is what founders should really be looking at. What are these sort of sunrise legacy industries which haven't been disrupted, haven't been sort of paid attention to? And I think it's much easier to create an impact there rather than be the next sort of delivery company, or what have you. So I think I think that those are a few thoughts that I'll just leave you with, and I encourage all of you to take advantage of today's event. Like I mentioned, networking is of course a key component of these events, but beyond that, just to kind of refresh your thinking, learn new ideas, really find out what are the pain points that customers have, that industry have. And I think, those act as great starting points for innovation. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. I think it's time you go from mining to crypto mining. There might be a little more excitement in that. So, we have a keynote address by Meenakshi Sundaram, who's founder and vice chairman of Chirate. He's unfortunately stuck at on the way. So I don't want to disrupt the schedule, but what we'll do is we'll move on with the next panel discussion. Paula is already here, and we'll have a short coffee break and start immediately after that with the first panel discussion. Once he comes, we'll have a separate session with him. So I didn't want to delay the session. So we'll have a short coffee break of 10 minutes and reassemble again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before we break in for the coffee, requesting Mr. Vinayak Bharti from Bolt Cargo to please felicitate our inaugural speakers, beginning with Ms. Swati Salgaonkar, Chairperson, CI West Region, and President VM Salgaonkar and Brother Private Limited, and Mr. Ninat Karpe, Chairman, CI Western Region Subcommittee on Startups and Entrepreneurship, and founder and partner, 100X VC. Can we have a group photo, please? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a quick short coffee break while we have a session changeover, and then we'll move on to the first panel discussion. Good afternoon, good evening. Requesting everyone to please take your seats as we start with the next session. So now we begin with our first panel discussion of the day, scaling at breakneck speed, the blueprint for hypergrowth startups. The panel is moderated by Ms. Paula Mariwala, founding partner, Aurelis Ventures. The panelists, I request them to please join us on stage. Requesting Ms. Paula Mariwala to please join us on stage. The panelists for the session are Deepak Gupta, General Partner, WEH Ventures, Mr. Vinayak Bharti, Founder and CMD Bolt Cargo Limited, and we will be soon joined on the stage by Mr. Sudeep Ghosh, Founder and Managing Director, Ace4 Accessories Private Limited, and Manas Madhu, Co-Founder, Beyond Snack. In the meanwhile, requesting Parliament to please take ahead the session.
Okay, I guess you may have to hear more of the moderator this time. But thank you, CII Western Region, and thank you, Ninad, for firstly choosing this very interesting topic and for inviting me to moderate. I think what sounds to be a very interesting panel which will bring out multiple facets of scale and growth. So I remember few years ago, maybe a couple of decades ago, when we had CII, FICCI, IMC, any of these meets, there was always talk about the growth story of India, and we were often referred to as the elephant economy. We were large but very slow and sluggish. We grew but very slowly. There was talk of IT, changing the world and changing our economy and so on. Hi, Sudipto, welcome. And a few years down, we are now talking about growth at breakneck speed. So very well coined, Ninad. This was something we really were not known for growing rapidly. In spite of our large markets, we always were linear with a very low slope of growth. But this has changed considerably in the last 2 decades, more so, I think, in the last 5 or 8 years. Today, Indian economy is the third largest startup economy globally, only second to US and China. We've overtaken UK as well. So when we talk of startups, we are talking of growth, we are talking of valuation, we are talking of non-linearity. And when you integrate all of that, and into a very large market like India, a very large country like India, a country with a lot of potential, because we have a very young population, we have a very entrepreneurial mindset in this country. It's a potent combination. And I think we are at that inflection point where we are seeing a lot of action in startups, in entrepreneurship, and in investing. So very well timed to talk about this kind of growth. And we have a wonderful panel where we have investors like me and Deepak who are bystanders, and we just love when anything grows non-linearly. We have entrepreneurs who have actually really changed and disrupted industries which one may not really club them as hyper growth or new technologies or new sectors. So with that, I'm going to just start by inviting my panelists to give their perspective on what really they see as hypergrowth. Let me start with you, Deepak, a fellow investor. You know, you've been in Intel, you know, which at one point was a startup and disrupted the world substantially with its innovations, and you know, created a lot of other startups on the back of it. And then you've seen in India the growth in the early years when you were probably witnessing what's happening in the ecosystem was great, but it was a lot of Me Too. And we really did not have any idea of this kind of nonlinear growth, which would give liquidity to investors and to founders. What do you think has been a real game changer in the last few years, which has led us to talk about this topic today?
So I think you're right. I think you touched upon, if you look at the macro, I mean, we had the Hindu rate of growth, right? The elephant, one step, two steps forward, one step back. That was maybe 20, 30 years ago. The first internet wave in India, I think I remember when I actually joined Intel in the year 2000 or so, there were 35 lakh internet users. And we used to pitch to our IC to fund these models for online education and things, and we were like probably 10 years early in some cases. And so, if you ask me, I think one is at the macro level. We have many good things starting from the headline GDP, etc. Then we've had the mobile wave of 2016 and very deep internet penetration, banking penetration, UPI, etc. And the third is what we've seen even in China. If you see China in the 2010s or so, the ground up innovation, like the Me Too models receded. Like Flipkart was a Me Too model for, say, Amazon. But if you look at the more recent, even the Me Shows, etc., I think more and more we are finding, like we have a company, Apps for Bharat, in our portfolio, for example. Has to be built ground up, right? So there is enough depth in each segment of attainable value because you have 800 million internet users. We have the founders who are now seasoned, who have worked in startups or are repeat founders. We have very cheap data. We have all the innovation rails funding. And I think, therefore, we have this whole substrate and ambition. Like my generation, we didn't have that kind of ambition in the 90s. We were the MTV looking at the Western world. No need to look there, right? So I think all the ingredients have come together. So at least that part of our ecosystem of ambition, driving for growth is a settled hypothesis, right? I remember in the 2000s, the technical founders in Bangalore, I thought they were not so ambitious. They were very good. They came out of TI and Intel and all, right? Now that has changed. The same founders are more ambitious. So I think all that is leading to a imperative for hyper growth, subject to, of course, some of the fundings ups and downs. But that is you can't be a valuable startup until you have some hyper growth phase, sustained phase in your life, right? In the first 5 years or so. There's no value creation otherwise. That's the way I see it.
Thanks, Deepak. Very valid point on what we are now broadly calling digital transformation. I mean, many of us remember when we would, when the mobile telephony had just come, internet was new. We would, when we would land from Bombay to, say, Bangalore, we would switch off our mobile data because data was so expensive. So data has become ubiquitous. Penetration of internet, mobile telephony, all of that has become ubiquitous over a period of time. But I think another change that has happened is the mindset of the Indian consumer along with the whole digital transformation. So now we are seeing a disruption which is actually many layers above some of this technology which actually fueled this whole growth. And we have two founders actually who have disrupted so-called very competitive and traditional segments. So, Sudipta, I'm going to start with you. Luggage was always dominated by a couple of brands, international brands, Indian brands, and so on. to really have hyperscale and have VC interest in a pedantic sort of sector like luggage, and then to think of this kind of growth. I know you come from great experience in the sector, but again, these companies had established themselves over many years. How did you sort of think about this kind of nonlinear growth, hypergrowth company, and how did you think of distribution with this technology backend as well as the latent demand?
Okay, thank you. First of all, this is the first conference where where the meeting started early. So, I mean, I was actually a little shocked when I walked in. I realized it started, and I thought it's 5:30. So fantastic. I think whoever is organized. Uh, and also, Shubho Shoptumi Oshtumi for all the Bengalis who are here. I got delayed because I was serving Bhog. I'm telling this because I'm a very traditional guy, and I got into a very traditional business. I think you touched upon very rightly. If somebody had asked me 5 years back, 7 years back, would you like to start up on your own? I would have thought twice because the consumers, I've seen how consumers have changed, and over the last 3 years, I've seen a drastic change that has happened, which has helped people like us who understand the industry and who have worked in the traditional. Wow, that's another first. Yeah. So for a person like me who have worked in this traditional industry for the last 20 years, suddenly we see a pathway that gets created where we know that if we can find a white space, consumers are willing to listen to you, and consumers willing to move out of the traditional mindset of buying a product which is quite, again, very traditional. So I think two things. One, obviously, technology, which has helped us to reach to the new age consumers. And second, and the most important, is the consumer, because he's ready to try out new things if it makes sense to him, and if you give a good product to him, he's ready to try out and moving out of the traditional thing. So yeah, I think that's the reason why a traditional industry like luggage can also be disrupted.
Thanks. And another mold that you broke is typically VCs prefer young, fresh, inexperienced, maybe some sort of pedigree of education, but those who can work 28 hours a day kind of approach. And actually, you got some great VCs to invest in you.
Yeah,
So that's another sort of.
I still thought I was young, but yeah, I'll leave it up to you. Yeah, I think VCs are also changing. I started my entrepreneur journey at the age of 49. The advantage of that is I know where are the potholes. I know how to maneuver it, and that's what I think. Right from my seed VC to my Series A and Series B, I was very lucky to meet some of the great mindsets, and I have realized I never knew the VC world till I was 49 years old. I mean, I used to know about them, but I never interacted with them. There are 3-4 kinds of VCs that I've understood over the years, and there are some people who also believe in the sector and the person who is backing, or some person who is promoting it. So I think that's where a young person like me at 49 can start, and people like you also come and invest. So yeah.
Well, we need many young entrepreneurs like you. Coming to you, Vinayak, you also are in a sort of an entrenched industry, and you managed to grow substantially without the blessings of any VCs. And actually, most VCs are now looking at those models, what we very fashionably, people like Deepak and I call bootstrapped, which just means you do dhanda. You just do a business as business and not necessarily rely on VCs to give you gyan. But typically traditional medium businesses in India were what Deepak alluded to, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, simply because of the ecosystem the way it is, particularly in sectors like maybe logistics that you've chosen to be an entrepreneur in. Tell us from your perspective, how did you perceive growth, and how did you sort of disrupt, and that too without raising capital from in form of equity. You were sort of self-funded or internally funded. How does one get really growth of the kind that we're talking about in industries like yours?
Thank you, Paula. Good evening, everyone. And I'm a little fast speaker, so please pardon me for speaking, faster than the normal pace of the panelists. Coming to Ms. Paula's question, how are you doing it? I mean, see, the first thing I would say is I'm not disrupting anything. I am only doing things right. The common question that I'm being posed with is when you say, okay, we have a ARR of 100 CR, new age startup in logistics in a industry which is very fragmented. The questions that I'm being posed with is, who is your investor, right? I believe we also need to remember there are Zerodhas and Zohos of the world who are doing things just right and catching consumers' attention, right? And more so in B2B segment. In my 7 years journey with Bolt Cargo, since the topic is bliss scaling and moving at a breakneck speed, I would say we never tried to do a bliss scale, right? Because the definition of bliss scale is speed over efficiency, right? We believe in speed with efficiency, right? The runway that a company would have or a startup would have with capital infused by VCs or PEs or external infusion in any form, we do not have that runway. So we have no option but to do things right. Now, last year to this year, Bolt Cargo has grown 4x. We acquired a company which has grown 10x within 11 months. I mean, we have not even completed 1 year of acquisition. And we have done it all profitably, right? So I think we prepared quite a lot. And this is a message to all the startups who are coming up or those who are thinking of taking the plunge is do not run behind money, money will chase you, right? The time when you run behind money, you are pleasing sometimes beyond what you are actually capable of, right? But when you do things consistently right as a process, bring up the team together. I'll talk about team also. Then money will chase you, right? I'm a firm believer of a strong balance sheet, right? That always stands the testimony of time. I have seen companies in my space funded by Tiger, Axel, moving at a breakneck speed. They left a lot of tail behind. And in that tail, I'm talking about the tail of customers, right? And in that tail, we got TVSs, Tatas, right? Ashok Leylands of this, world. And they were just not happy. What worked in our favor in that blitz scaling was the customers. I mean, these companies were funded. They trained or they changed the mindset of the customers to adopt something new. So they were more open when we moved in. But for sure, we always kept our basics right. As I said, moving X to 4X from last year to this year, the preparation took quite some time, right? It meant putting the right team, right, who have a common vision and goal and consistently retaining the customer. One thing that becomes very common in bliss scaling is you lose the customer very fast, right? You acquire 100 customers, you tend to lose 30 customers. In trying to get the market dominance, in trying to, be present everywhere, sometimes you lose a lot of, trail behind, which can be captured by your competition. And that is exactly what we did, right? So I'm not against, bliss scaling, but bliss scaling with some sense prevailed will lead to sustainable companies of the future. That's my take.
No, excellent point, Vinayak. I think when the focus is not on creating value for the customer, maybe just valuation or sort of the glamour of growth, I think the basics are left behind. And on that, Deepak, we've seen a lot of this, right, in the industry, particularly in the last few years, and especially during COVID and post-COVID. I mean, big giants have sort of been disgraced now, but there was this whole thought of growing at any cost, and literally at any cost, which meant that you just blew up money. You didn't really care about any other metric. But that you spent the money that you raised. So you go raise more money. So it's an infinite raise to get an infinite growth. Is that the real growth? Some of these companies have actually not been able to survive because they couldn't raise more money. Some today have gone IPO. So what do you sort of think about this hyper growth at any cost, particularly from an investor who is clearly demanding because you need that to make your math? Or we used to think so. We may think differently now. But this whole concept of growth at any cost, pushed sometimes by the VCs.
You're right. I mean, as a very early stage investor, for any idea to reach a certain tipping point, right? There has to be a period of significant hyper growth because they all start at zero. So for our models to work, that has to happen in some fashion. I think what the change I've seen and you've seen, I guess, is earlier you would just grow the customer base and then think of monetization, and even that growth was fairly inefficient. Sometimes it was even before a product had begun to work. We've seen that in some unicorns as well, which I don't want to name. Now, according to me, and this is what we do also when we invest, because it's very easy to go by the trend line, 6 month sort of curve is there, because that always excites any investor. But we try to double click and understand what's driving it. And at a lot of times, even if it is uneven, we will invest in the company because that may be sort of a very early, but maybe the wrong thing. You just got some product out, it's working somewhere, but you actually need to, develop it in a slightly adjacent market. That's our perspective. So I think, yeah, the growth at all costs is a function of the cost function, which is a function of the market. But what is, I think, secularly happened is that founders who are growing at the same time are understanding the unit economics in real time and are actually able to call out a plan as to how it will converge. And they're then doing it most of the time now, which is good. And I think they will continue to do that to a large extent. And that is fine. I mean, I remember looking at companies like Ola, some of the numbers in the early days, they used to grow 9x a year and things like that, which was fair. It's just that the monetization perhaps arrived later. And in the meantime, the service promise in terms of or competition or whatever could not hold up, right? I'm talking about the cabs business. So you can grow, but like Vinayak said, right? Are you carrying the customers with you? And if you are, and you're able to convert some kind of unit economics, that's fine. But if it's just the growth, just for the eyeballs and things like that, then beyond a point, that's not going to work. And hopefully we'll see that early. And now the companies are also seeing that. And the irrationality of, 20 million, 30 million Series A checks, etc., just to grow from some of the tier one VCs, which we saw 4 or 5 years ago, is also gone away. So I think that throwing the money, so VCs had a lot to do with that, not just the founders. So that seems to have gone away, which is great. The other lesson I think fundamentally is in most markets, you want to reach scale, but it's not a winner take all market. You see most of the India problems. So therefore, what are you trying to achieve? Like Vinayak is not trying to be a 10,000 crore company in 5 years, right? I mean, yeah, he might get there, but I'm just saying. So So yeah, so therefore you are not going to prevent anybody else necessarily from capturing that, which was Reid Hoffman and others have talked about that. So I think that's partially true. I see in most of the Indian scenarios. So therefore it has to be somewhat calibrated.
Um, Deepak, you talked about the Indian market and the Indian consumer. We are known to be very value conscious. We are discerning, but it's also India is not a one size fits all market. Very very different types of customers, segmentation, regionality, and so on. So when you are looking at a consumer brand, D2C kind of a thing, how does one plan the scale, right? Because what somebody in Bombay wants is very different than somebody wants in let's say even in Pune, or I'm not even going to, let's say, Asansol or the Bharat market. So is it that the Indian market, because now we are expecting growth in many sectors, and the Indian consumer is really sort of shaping the growth as well. In particularly in a direct to consumer kind of a thing, how do you actually profile a customer? Because now with the internet, with D2C, you can reach anywhere, right? You can go to Asansol and sell. So the distribution is a key, but profiling of the customer to get this kind of numbers and to project, like Vinayak said, you can think of a large market, but you need to do sizing. So how does that work in a disparate market like India when you are trying to model for hypergrowth?
Okay. If you have to start talking about luggage industry, it will take another 2 hours just to explain how it works. But at least for our industry, which is luggage, I have worked with the multinational, and I have seen what works in Miami works in Mednipur. Trust me, people travel, they buy bags, they want bags which are sturdy, good looking, and it helps. To understand that the basic need of a consumer of a category uh, really changes. At least for luggage, I've seen. I've worked in other categories; they are very different. But for luggage, it is not as different as. Uh, Sure, the top metros do believe in the badge value, but otherwise the core category need for this category is kind of more or less the same. Now, keeping that aside, I think I in today, with the kind of technology which is available, most of the consumers are kind of at par. I don't think there is a different consumer in a small town versus a large town. Um, they need good products at a value for money, at least the segment that we are operating. And if we can provide that to them, then they are ready to, you know, take the product or take the brand forward. Um, we launched this brand of ours, which I hope everybody knows. It's called Uppercase, and we are the India's first certified sustainable luggage. We make luggage out of sustainable material, knowing fully well that the category need is very low. People do not buy luggage because of sustainability, but we as an organization wanted to start investing on it because we know that in 5 years, 6 years down the line, it would play a very important role in terms of deciding, provided everything else is constant. So there are some category needs. You cannot have a bag and say it's a sustainable and you have to pay 15,000 rupees, or you cannot have a bag sustainable. We said you can only use it for 2 trips and it will break. So the category codes have to be maintained, and going forward, sustainability will play an important role in choice of the brand, and therefore we have started investing, understanding very well that currently it's an investment that we are making without expecting an immediate return. That is very important, and I would like to just take a point here is that yes, when you have VCs, they have their agenda, but you need to do what is right. I used to run a listed company, and if you see the performance of that company from say 2016 to 2021 when I was running it, I never worked for quarters. I never worked for the share prices and the share prices kept growing because you have to do what is right for the organization and not if what you will have pressures. They will have their agendas, but you need to kind of tell your partners and you have to choose the partner very right. I have said no to term sheets, uh, three of them actually, because at the last moment I realized that maybe this partner is not right. Choosing a partner, it's not that whoever is giving you money, you need to take it. You need to take the money with the right kind of mindset because it's like if once you are in for quite a long run, and you don't want to have or not choose the right partner in this case. That's very, very important.
Thanks. That's really a key to a good growth is to have the right kind of understanding of between all the stakeholders, and certainly VCs are your partners. Manas, welcome. I thought you'll bring us some banana chips since you're late, but maybe after the event. But Manas, we've been talking about growing hyper growth in India, growing at breakneck speed, and certainly you have grown amazingly in a sector of packaged snacks, that to banana chips, which we've had for years. We've all had our favorite banana chips. We didn't maybe sometimes know the brands. How did you firstly think of getting into this sector, which, as an entrepreneur? And did you think that you are really going to grow at this kind of a pace that you did amazingly? And maybe throw some numbers for the audience to get a flavor of. I think you only started in 2020, if I remember. I want to just give a small anecdote of how we think we are prescient, but we are really not. In 2011, 10 or 11, I think a gentleman called Binny Bansal came to us. I used to run a fund called Seed Fund at the time, and talked about selling books online, 2010, I think. And I said, who is going to buy books online in India? I mean, we had a couple of online companies, Redbus and so on. It was a pain to get anything done online. We used to have cash on delivery. I mean, they had to go somewhere to pay. At that time, they did not have the cash on delivery model, but we said, it's a crazy idea. You go to the bookstore and buy. No Indian is going to buy. So we did my anti-portfolio. We did not invest in Flipkart. And then Lenskart also was the same. And then rest, they say, as they say, is history, because now I talk about these anti-portfolios to get attention. But the point is that an entrepreneur is able to see something that sometimes most others are not. So tell us a little bit about your story and throw in some numbers, the kind of growth you've got.
Yeah, first of all, extremely sorry for being a bit late. I'm still figuring out Mumbai traffic and optimizing my time around it. Yeah, so coming back to this, so this banana chips as a category was overlooked always, and it was always considered as a part of a subset of namkeens. But nobody really tried to carve it out and create an independent category out of it. And I firmly believed that it has a potential to match the scale and the growth as potato chips bringing for the multinational companies. But it is just that if any innovation or any sort of standardization has to happen on banana chips, it has to be from India, because only we have the habit of consuming it as vegetable. Across the world, it was consumed as fruit, and then if at all they think about a chips, they will be thinking only about fruit chips. But savory snack is one of the biggest category, and within that, bringing banana chips as a savory category will be difficult or maybe not very thought of. And that's where I thought, okay, there is a brilliant opportunity there. But if we wanted to bring it into that kind of a massive category, then we need to bring the scalability aspect into it, which means we need to do the standardization. So wherever you are opening the packet, it has to give the same kind of an experience, right? And if you crack only then it has basically you need to bring out an industrially viable product out of that. It need to move away from that hot chips kind of the persona it already had. So that is when we thought of investing time, effort, and money into that thing. And fortunately things worked out, and then people also loved our product. And then we launched it to the market. We realized that okay, our thesis was pretty much correct, because there is a good tailwind for that category. People were looking out for great quality banana chips, but it was just not available at an arm's length. And then we realized that okay, the only job that we need to do is to make it available at an arm's length. So that's what we are doing right now. We kind of, grown 2020, in that year we closed at around 3.6. Right now we are looking at around almost, 100x kind of a growth from that particular time onwards. Right now we are sitting, but yeah, I mean we have a lot more, milestones to achieve.
So I think 100x VCs invested, so they saw the
100x
potential.
first check, yes.
Yeah, 100x guy. But since I missed asking a couple of questions, I'm going to ask a couple more. It was not common, like I mentioned, I also missed some these online e-commerce kind of stuff. But buying food online was in 2020, of course, with COVID, things were changing. So in India, we feel that, just D2C chalega ke nahi. What do you think? Do we always need a hybrid model in India? You started, I believe, as a D2C brand, and I think timing was great because it was COVID. But what do you think of distribution online versus offline? And how, when you're doing, online, you have to serve, because then you're, like we were talking, anybody from anywhere can order, right? So how did you think about the market, and what is the kind of distribution that you require to grow, continue to growing this kind of 100x kind of growth?
Honestly speaking, when we launched, it was in 2020 Jan, and at that point of time there was no COVID, right? So we wanted to launch it in offline retail market. But what happened is, in 3 months later, this COVID happened. Then the only option we had was online, and I was really not very pro about online at that time, because I was always with the perception that this is an impulse buying category. How can people buy it from online? But since, as an entrepreneur, we always look out for ways to sell the product, and that's what we did. And then we listed it in Amazon and Flipkart. But my assumptions were completely wrong. The kind of overwhelming response that we received from Amazon and Flipkart was, proved us that this can be a great channel. And later, it become, our go-to channel also to, whenever we launch a new set of product. And one of the things that I realized is that, nowadays, more and more such channels are opening up. You don't really need to have a, strong distribution muscle. Like the HULs and the PNGs of the world already had. If you have a great product, you can list it in Amazon and Flipkart. It's free of cost, absolutely no cost involved, and the kind of the volume that it can give is brilliant. And I never thought, Amazon or a Flipkart or a D2C, as a matter of fact, can give that kind of a volume. And of course, FMCG is always a volume business, and if you not manage to bring in that kind of a volume, it will be very difficult. But Amazon, all these e-commerce, and even now quick commerce also is able to bring in that kind of a brilliant volume. To answer your question that, okay, is it a hybrid model? I think that more importantly, we need to look at a business as a whole. Okay, what is your product and how you can make the product available to the consumer, and whichever route to market you can choose for that, that is the best. If depending on your scale and the size of the business, in the initial days you will not be having that kind of a resources to set up the entire distribution in place. Then now we have a cheaper option like Amazon and Flipkart and D2C available with us. So we will obviously choose that. And once we scale up after reaching a particular scale, then we can actually invest a little bit of a money, and then we can build that distribution strength also. So that is not exactly what we are doing. We didn't have that kind of a resource initially. So the money that we received from 100x, we utilized it maximum to spread ourselves in all these online platforms. Then we become #1 selling banana chips across all these platforms. Slowly and steadily, people started realizing and recognizing our brand on this platform. So then we started entering into retail. There, people started recognizing further that, okay, beyond snack, I know, good banana chips. Let me try it out, because they might have already tried it from Amazon or a Blinkit, right? So it is always complementing all these, the trade channels are complementing to each other. Depending on your business, your size and the scale, you should choose, which channel would be apt at that point of time.
Great insights. Deepak, on that, if it's a good product, maybe it can grow. If it's a good founder, maybe he can make anything grow. But what is really the winning combination? I mean, how do you as a VC make a judgment, because a lot is to do, like he said, COVID happened. So it was timing also, right? But what are the qualities of a founder or founding team who can really give us this kind of nonlinear growth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, COVID, what is ex post, you can't predict. So you can only underwrite what you can see. I think if we talk about D2C, we've done a few. I think first thing we look for is completeness of skills between the founders. So, and because we come in early, it's always first the product, right? The product has to be right because it's a dud product. You can market it, but it'll die at some point. So 70-80% is the product. Then some early, marketing, brand thoughts, uh, some hustle, ability to raise capital. And like Manas was saying, I think what has happened in the last 4-5 years is the hegemony of just Amazon and Flipkart is now expanded. Then there's been a mini hegemony of QC, but that also seems to be expanding, more and more players. So you have 6-7 channels there and your own website. Of course, not all products lend themselves to websites. Like, I don't know if KBC would work well on a website. It was a low ticket thing, but so that's happening. So the first phase of distribution is not that complex in some sense. There is a playbook. First 2-3 years. Then cracking offline is the other art. And that needs capital, it needs some patience, it needs maybe some external help. Because there are a lot of veterans available you can lean on, so you don't make as many mistakes. So that I feel is a journey for D2C, and I don't think we calibrate the founders only on hyper growth. Of course, they have to achieve it. I mean, it's a wholesome metrics out of which the ambition and drive to grow, and also the ability to raise capital. Because if you have to grow, you need the next capital. We calibrate to that and the gap in the market, right? We have a company, MasterChow, for example. I don't think it's grown as fast as Manas, but again, there's a gap for premium Chinese in the market, and maybe others didn't see it. And Ching's had scaled to 700 crores and things like that. So at least there was a gap in the market. That's how we start looking at things.
Vinayak, coming to B2B businesses, of course, you've grown on your own steam. What are your biggest challenges that you faced? Because you did not have a VC who could fund you even if you made mistakes or push you in a particular direction. Just as an MSME, what were your biggest challenges as you were, particularly when you entered the growth phase and you set your targets, to grow whatever velocity that you wanted to grow?
Firstly, 2 comments before I answer your question. Is, I love being challenged. And on the dais, I was challenged by Mr. Deepak that you're not chasing 10,000 crore valuation. And definitely I am, right? The reason I'm quoting this is, not everything can be done with capital. There are so many good things you can do over a period of time, and you can still reach the same level where probably a VC funded or a PE or capital injected company can reach. I'll give you an example. In my industry, B2B industry, when we started in 2017, there was a wave of black buck, right? Heavily funded unicorn company. Everywhere we went to meet customers, we saw them as our competitors, and they were dropping rates like crazy. And then came a time we are not seeing black buck as our competition, and there's enough and more space for us to grow, right? And second, I would say, is coming to international freight forwarding. We saw Axel-backed companies like Cogoport or Westfreight reaching up to, almost a unicorn status and then dying down over a period of time. So that is why it is important to have the right basics in place. Coming to whether I was approached by VCs or why I chose not to go to VC, because I thought that the time is not right. The idea has to mature. Your pillars have to be right. When you get money, you must know where to spend it. I come from a family where my father was in government job, we come from savings mindset. It never strikes to me that I can blow billions to get customers and then eventually lose them, right? It does not strike to me. I sold my house to start this company, so money is precious to me, right? And those who are investing in me sooner or later have to find value over a period of time. May not be as astronomical as many others would offer for an early stage this thing, but numbers will not lie, right? How many companies who got Series A or B went into Series D or E, right? Whether it is the right time for us to go about it, I'm not sure, but there would definitely be a time when we will be approaching VCs and PEs for investment, or maybe a strategic investor from overseas to do a JV with us. Uh, Coming to how difficult it is to do it bootstrap, it is difficult. You have to always think differently. You cannot be competing with DHLs by thinking like a DHL, right? The agility that a company like a young company or a agile company brings helps them blitz scale, right? And sustainably, more importantly, sustainably. You grow at 10x in a year and down by half because your runway got exhausted blowing millions. I catch up with that pace. So in a rabbit and hare story, I do not want to be the rabbit. Likewise, I do not want to be a tortoise. I definitely want to have a gray area where we can thrive and grow at a breakneck speed.
We'll soon open for questions. Manas, I just want to bring you in. What are the challenges that you faced? Because you had some funding, but I also want to laud you and bring it out because Ninad did mention in the beginning about women being involved in businesses and women entrepreneurs. I'm happy to note that you have a very large workforce of women, and you are expanding to bring in more women and also creating impact. So, two questions quickly. Did you think of impact as integral to your business? And it is difficult to keep to your original thesis many a time when you're growing at this speed, also with the pressures of investors, teams, and so on. So, one is, did you think of impact as you grew? And what were the biggest challenges you faced, and you continue to face, or you think you'll continue to face?
To answer your first question about the impact, it actually evolved in our case. We never thought of doing it in the beginning, but as we progress, as we adding more and more team, one of the things that we realized, I know it is, I think it may be a little controversial, but we found women are much more responsible in handling even the entire production and even in the office also. We found it much more responsible. But when we started doing the mass scale of production, we realized that the number of errors are substantially low comparing to we having a woman workforce. They take things much more, even the smallest of things they care. And take care of this really well. So we kind of evolved into that. This is that okay, we need to have this 100%, and I think it never happened. Also, if we are making it a reality, it never happened in any of the factory that a 100% workforce of women, and it is really challenging in that angle if you see, because think about a plumbing job or a mechanical job or electrical job is doing by a woman. We need to actually put a person over there to train them and then make them level up to that kind of it's really challenging, but we are on to that journey. In the initial days, of course, the product was the biggest challenge that we faced, because one of the thing is why banana chips was stuck at where it was some 50 years ago is because there is a lack of innovation. Nobody wanted to bring it out, bring it into a standardized format. If you look at in order to bring in a standardization, there is a lot of trials and errors required. You need to have that kind of a technical expertise to bring in to achieve that. When you're opening up a Lay's packet, the kind of the experience will be the same if you're opening up in Kerala or Chennai or in Jammu and Kashmir, right? Even if you go abroad, also you'll be getting the same experience. That consistency is what bringing that trust in consumers' mind that okay, at any given point of time, I can go and buy a packet of Lay's. It will be the same experience. And if you're not able to bring in that kind of an experience even for banana chips, then there is no point in getting into this industrialization of banana chips. So standardization, it took a longer period of time for us. Actually, we worked almost 8 months to crack that code. We were also working on jackfruit chips, but we couldn't bring in that kind of standardization. But banana chips, we managed to achieve it in 8 months. Then that product became our confidence. Wherever we go and present our product, people really loved it. People wanted to try it more. Then eventually that confidence started coming in, and then we decided to put in more and more money and scale it up. But yeah, I mean, the initial days, one of the biggest challenge that we faced was, of course, the product, and then eventually probably the team. But now, slowly and steadily with the capital, we are also able to bring in better and bright talent into the team. So yeah, that's we are. I hope I answered the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, great. Thanks, Manas. And in a room full of men, I think it's heartening to hear that women are more productive. So on that note, I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience for the panel. I think there are mics.
First of all, thank you CI. Because of this time, I could able to attend the last ride of the Ratan Tata when I was entered the hotel actually. Otherwise cannot get this opportunity. As this topic of this session and the theme of this, bold vision, busy impact. So I wouldn't know, because any startup start with the innovation culture, and then again, his startup founder has to come to the business development also. So sometimes innovation cultures left behind. So I want to know, there are the entrepreneurs and investor both are there. So there are the two things I want to ask. Sometimes, startup design the solution for the big companies actually, which is really productive, but sometimes big companies require something more follow-up, maybe few months of follow-up. And really, I've been associated with this. I come to know CI just before 6 years ago, and it's created really immense opportunity for networking and come to know about who is who and how the solution can be applied. But it's required some time to follow up and implementing, because sometimes PSU or some big corporate give us small order like 50 lakhs, then 5 crore. Does the investors give the such importance in the business development? Either some founder can join or some, hiring the people in, because such kind of hiring people is also some expensive. Second thing, as an entrepreneur, you come into the business side, you left behind the, innovation culture. Thus, entrepreneurs who are the moving stage, scaling stage, and innovations continue accelerating area. Whether you hire the agency who continue offer you back-end support about the in your business model, continue innovation accelerating. So these are the two things how our economy.
Sure. Deepak, you want to take it then maybe?
Yeah, I think one part of your question, I think, is on enterprise or business to business sales. And does the founder get help from investors or connections to experts to help? So I think the answer is partly yes, in the sense, if you start a business where the core customer is a large business or enterprise, then one is your product may be innovative, but ideally in your team there should be, or yourself, most of these companies, the first 5-10 sales are typically done by the founder, because that process, that skill is needed, and it also helps to iron out the product, whether it works or not, right? And then as you grow, then you need VP of sales, etc. And that, some of the investors who you've got, they may be experts, they may help you to find these people. But I think fundamentally, if you're starting up, then you should build that muscle yourself, the first few sales, to figure out whether you have the right product and the right customer and establish some early salience. I think the other part of the question was more on innovation. And I think
Innovation, or whether you can continue being innovative as a founder.
Okay, one thing for sure, you cannot stop innovating, right? And this word might sound big, but break it down, and it is continuous process improvement is also innovation, right? I mean, whatever you do it better the next day. You are innovating something, right? So do not, be taken aback that I'm not disrupting by innovating something big, right? At times, small innovations also improve efficiency and impacts in a big way, right? That is one. Second, I would say, second, you mentioned about sales. I mean, in a startup organization, everybody sells, right? I mean, whether it is investor who are partnering with you, whether it is VCP, nobody wants you to fail, including you or your team, right? So, I mean, it has to have a culture where in middle of operations or XYZ, everybody must sell. The third you mentioned is about, I caught that word. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the entire statement, but you said expensive people, right? Trust me on one thing, good people are never expensive, right? They will always prove their worth at the right place if you give them wings, right? And allow them to have a common vision. They will never be expensive for your company. And that is the most important thing a founder should be looking at when building a team. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, firstly, thank you for having me. I'm Aryan Avasthi. I'm a student, a management student at IIM Calcutta. I have been facing a problem, which is that I have created a product, and yet when I see it, I know it is there is a lot more to be done. There are a lot more iterations to be done before I think it will be perfect. Yet at the back of my head, I know that it will quite possibly never be perfect for me, like good enough for me. So how do you do that? How do you at one point stop and say, you know what, this is good enough to be sent out, or this is something that is valuable enough for a customer to come up and want to buy it from you? So what's that metric? What's that point? Also, I just have a question, if I may direct the question at you, Manas. You mentioned that banana chips in Western, it's seen as a fruit. So have you ever thought about like fruity flavors for the West, like strawberry banana chips? Yeah.
I think I'll add my contribution towards the first part of the question, and your panel also can add it. As far as we are concerned, progress is more important than perfection. You can always perfect it as you go, and with the limited amount of resources, you can actually validate your product market fit also, right? And you don't need to have that 10. I'm not sure what exactly your product, but I figure out, let's say that product have 10 features, probably that first 2 features, whether it is working out for consumers, you will be able to understand if you roll it out and test it with the consumer. So, and it's much more cheaper, and nowadays this is the followed trend. And to give you the second part, answer to the second part of the question, yeah, overseas is always is one of the things that we always look forward to, and we already working with some of the countries abroad. Fruity flavors, of course, adding to the first question, right? So the innovation is something that we wanted to bring in much more innovative, meaningful innovations in our product offerings. Of course, we will be working towards that as well.
Yeah, I think scaling for startup is a very important topic, and we're also one of the innovative startups recognized in the DPIIT Startup India, and we're also MSME. So my first question is, Government of India is already given the 3 years of ATIC exemption for the startups, innovative startups. But when we are going for the applying for the 100% exemptions, we are just giving the words, but no exemptions are coming up from the Government of India. I am raising this issue on the CII because we already contacted CII North region, and they are also in contact with the Government of India CBDT on making the policy changes. I just wanted to see how we can the CII and all the panelists can help, because the scaling and the liquid problem is the major problem for the growth of the any startups. And Government of India itself promised that they have 100% exemption for 3 consecutive years out of 10 years, and these 3 years they are considering as a MAT, right? If I'm spending MAT amount of getting deducted, even though I'm 100% ATIC exemption, CBDT is deducting 18% of MAT. So the 18% of MAT is accumulated for next 10 years I have to use. So there is no benefit that in how startups are getting up. So this is the major issue that is every startup is facing. We are almost 100 startups. We are chasing this with the Government of India, but we want looking for the more resolution. The second part, the another question is that, and we are also into the IT services. We provide the IT services globally, especially for US. So when we're, because I think Vinayak, you can help in this front, because we fall under the innovation what you are doing, making a lot of skills management, in-house development or everything. So the main concern is when we are going for project or services, the US companies are means the getting the funds, whatever the invoice that we are getting raised, and they have been wiped off by their US bankruptcy laws, because now the economy is very down in US. So every company is going into the bankruptcy mode, and they are just wiping out their hands that you are not going to get the money. So in this case, government of India has to take some very aggressive steps in order to make our India third economic country, and we are giving a lot of statement that India has to become a third economic country in next 5 years. If the startups and MSMEs are not going to resolve this problem, I'm not sure how we are going to get these things. So these are the two major things, burning issues for the startups, and I think CI should take this very.
Yeah, point taken. I think CII, we really need to do this. This problem with DPIT and has been going on for almost last 8 years. CBDT has not been very understanding, I have to say, but it's certainly thing that we have to amplify. Otherwise, a lot of startups also don't make it because of this. A lot of MSMEs don't make it also, and they're not being given their due. So I think CII should take it up as at the national level. But I think our time is up. Any last comments, or should we just? Well, let's take the last comments from everybody, and then hand over.
Okay. Like to end, when I got this topic, I smiled because my first slide when I approached, and I was starting a luggage business when the second wave of COVID was hitting. Okay, the world was sleeping, and I was starting a luggage business. And it said, though I'm a startup, but I'm not a startup. Though I'm starting up, but I'm not a startup. That's how it started, and things happened. I firmly believe that good, cheap, and fast, you can only get two. You will never get three. Okay. If you want to grow fast and good, it will not be cheap. Cheap and fast, it will not be good. So please understand, whoever is investing or whoever is coming, you have to balance. It's like playing a innings of 50 over. When you get a chance, you hit. When you see a fast bowler who is doing well, you need to conserve your energy. You balance it out, and that's the most important thing, because you are here for a longer run. If you come hit couple of sixes and get out, it's not going to do any good to anybody, whether it is you or the VCs. Everybody loves sixes, right? VCs love sixes. Investors love sixes, but you are the one who is batting. Be careful when you're batting. That's it.
Vinay?
Sudeep, you just stole the show. I mean, amazing closing words. A few quick points from my end. Two startups is you can achieve anything that you dream, right? The speed can vary. People can label you as a successful person or a failure or mediocre, but success is only defined by you, right? Don't get swayed away by the buzzwords of the industry, right? Do what is important for you, your team, and the team will take care of the rest. Some of the questions that I would answer along with this is there are a lot of government schemes. It's not only tax waivers, there's CGTMSE, there's for much smaller startup or young age, you get non-collateral money. But remember one thing, do not wait for things to happen, right? I mean, tax waiver does not come. I mean, out of all of us who have worked in a corporate job, we would not be saying to a crore salary, we would not be saying no to a crore salary just because there is an additional cess to it, right? Or 50 lakh salary because there is an additional cess to it. Focus on earning money, focus on building a product, focus on your customers most importantly. And many times, if you are solving genuine problems, trust me, your customer will fund you. Recently, we did a project in Guyana, which you can Google, is the heaviest cargo ever handled in Guyana. And we had no money. I mean, 1.6 million to be spent in a span of 45 days. The customer funded us, and it was a global RFQ where we were, competing against DHLs. So find some ways to raise money for yourself. VCs are good, they are family offices, but at times raise it for yourself. Thank you.
I'm going to keep the last word for Deepak, and no, Deepak will have the last word as I want to get the founders.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I am eligible enough to give that kind of a wisdom because I'm still figuring out a lot of things. But I can tell you from my experience, one of the things that worked for us is that the focus on the execution. Instead of doing 10 different things, what we did is that we did only one thing. And we always wanted to do that thing very well and focus much more on execution. That fortunately working out for us. And thanks to all the I must say that the venture capital being coming into that venture capital ecosystem only, then it brings us much more clarity in terms of direction, in terms of learnings and everything. So I am always fortunate that okay, I had good amount of good VCs always backed us. So yeah, thank you, thanks for that.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, but I think Ninad is organized this event and it's about venture backed and disruption. I think that's true. I mean, I've been a VC for a while, but I agree with Vinayak. I think when people are starting up, while there is capital available, I think the fundamental contours of the thought and the problem statement should not be colored by VC. Like you were saying, right? You have a problem. So go ahead and try it out. Like Paul Graham says, right? Don't form a company first. First try out something and then you will have a company and then you might have a business. So I think that fundamental is always true. And I think while the FANGs dominate the US stock indices, but if you look across America or any other country, only a small percentage of companies are actually successful companies are VC backed. So VC is a certain type of capital. You can raise it now, like Vinayak said, you can raise PE when you're scaled. So I don't think people should default think to that. Uh, and that makes, a more pure process of sort of pursuing your ambitions, and then if something works, then of course, you can change gears to VC or other. I'm sure when you started KBC, you're not thinking of VC, right? Yeah. So
In fact, I did not have much knowledge about it, and only through 100x I actually exposed to that big world, and I feel fortunate for that actually.
So on that note, we need good VCs like 100x and Deepak and some of us. But more than anything, we need great entrepreneurs, great founders, great ideas, people who will innovate, take risks, and show how we can really grow with value, not just valuation. On that note, Ninad, we'll close the session. Thank you, panelists, for a very engaging talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Paula Mariwala, for that well handled session. Now, may I request Ninad sir to please come on stage and felicitate our panelists and the moderator for today. Starting with Mr. Deepak Gupta, General Partner, WEH Ventures.
thank you so much.
Mr. Sudeep Ghosh, Founder and Managing Director, Ace4 Accessories Private Limited. Mr. Manas Madhu, Co-Founder, Beyond Snack. Mr. Vinayak Bharti, Founder and CMD, Bolt Cargo Limited. And our moderator of the session, Paula Mariwala, Founding Partner, Oralis Ventures. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our esteemed panelists and the moderator. May I request everyone to please join in for a group photograph. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to our second panel discussion of the day, which is navigating the IPO journey, unveiling triumphs, trials, and winning strategies for startups. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Rana Lalwani, founding partner, Innovent Triple Blue Capital Advisors LLP. Hi, Tarana. And she will be joined on the stage on the dais by Mr. Vikram Gupta, founder IV Cap Ventures Advisors Private Limited, Mr. Rishi Gupta, managing director Fino Bank, Mr. Nitish Mitasen, CEO and joint MD Nazara Technologies. Nitish is not coming. तू मेरे को बताया है जो अपडेटेड एजेंडा नहीं दिया कहाँ से लिए थे बाहर दे दिया सर handing over the session to Tarana.
Thank you. Hi, so I have two esteemed speakers here. Rishi, who's actually a founder and now CEO and MD of Fino Bank, and Vikram, who is an investor. So I thought we get two interesting perspectives on IPOs from both these individuals, on especially given what we've seen in our environment right now. From I was just joking with them. Not only have we seen a reverse drain of individuals and Indians coming back to the country, where we all went through an era where we all ran away to the US or wherever and now have come back, but also companies, right? There was a time I remember I've been part of the startup ecosystem for 15 years. Everyone was looking to flip to Singapore or the US because they want to go list there because companies, it's so easy to list there. And now we're seeing the reverse flip where companies are now flipping back to India to list. So with that, I'm going to let Rishi start by introducing himself and maybe a little bit on Fino as well. So just people have a perspective. And then Vikram. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. Is it working? Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, CII, for hosting us today. So Fino is an 18-year-old company. When we started in 2006, there was no word as startup. So we listed ourselves as a company, and the endeavor was to achieve financial inclusion, go to the last mile, deliver financial services in an affordable manner to the people in the hinterland. I joined this company as a founder member in the company. We did multiple raise 2006, 2007, 2009, 11, 13, 4-5 raise we did. Then we did another one in 2017, and then we went public in 2021. So after 4-5 rounds of fundraise from different private equity guys, we went public in 2021. We started as a business correspondent working for multiple banks with an endeavor to make technology accessible to everybody so that at the end we can deliver financial services in an affordable, efficient manner. In that process, the Reserve Bank of India came out with multiple differentiated licenses, Payments Bank and Small Finance Bank. We applied for a Payments Bank license in 2015. We got the approval from the regulator in 2016, 2017. We launched our bank. We are a 7-year plus bank now. We have been profitable for the last 4-5 years. Last year, we did roughly about 1,500 crores of top line and about 85 crores of profit. And that's what we are. And by profession, I'm a chartered accountant, cost accountant. I'm a Delhiite, but moved to Bombay in 2006.
Vikram.
Thank you so much for having me here. I started IVCAP in 2011, so we just entered our teens now. So I moved back from US actually in 2005, and before IVCAP, I'd set up India's first healthcare life sciences private equity fund with the Pyramid Group. And the IVCAP model itself actually works on a very interesting, model, which is
bringing together the entire alumni ecosystem of the IITs and the IIMs as investors as well as mentors to the portfolio companies. I actually literally started the venture capital fund with zero capital in 2011 when I started. Today we have assets under management of over 5,000 crores, which is mainly domestic capital. We have close to 70% institutional capital, Indian institutional capital. But 20% of our capital is IIT alumni capital. We have a portfolio of about 50 companies. We do seed to Series B. We take very active position in these companies. We take 20 to 30% stakes. As an example, we would have taken 30% stake in Purple when we invested in Series A. Same thing in Clovia, in companies like Biryani by Kilo, Miko. We also invested in Bluestone. So these are some of our bets that we took very early.
Some that are probably going for a listing soon.
Yes, we've done 7 profitable exits through M&A, and one of our companies is now going for listing.
Great, thank you. So just maybe to start off, given you've seen a dynamic since 2011, and you were before that with the health sciences private equity fund. So you've seen sort of over the last 15 years, as you mentioned, a lot of your companies did exits through secondaries or M&A. Now sort of this IPO phenomenon. How do you sort of see them as an investor? What has your lens changed when you're looking at companies from an investment perspective? And then even with your portfolio, has sort of in terms of governance or on the board, the guidance of how these companies should start thinking, what their exit is going to be, and sort of what should they be looking for from a criteria or sort of business model, or even from a governance, just preparing?
So at the time of investing, we look for a 5-year time frame to exit. And if you're investing at Series A primarily,
but that doesn't happen 5 years.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. So effectively, at the time of investment, our primary objective is M&A at that point. So we evaluate the investment opportunity from an M&A perspective. However, if companies take a very interesting path, for example, we invested in Snitch from our Fund 3, which is $250 million in size. Within, I would say, less than 12 months, the company is actually scaled up 6 times already. And their EBITDA last year was 20 crores on a 250 crore top line. And the company is growing month on month. And we believe that within next 2 years, they will, with the way they are growing, with the the offline online mix of growth that they're having, I think they would easily become an IPO candidate. So while we go with the intention of evaluating these companies with the perspective of will they become meaningful assets for somebody else to acquire, and that's the investment thesis based on which we invest. But if the companies actually surprise us and take a very interesting curve, then they become candidates for IPOs.
Fair. Interesting.
Add to what he was saying, in my own experience, when we raised private equity 4, 5, 6 rounds, and the most of the conversation, the most tense part of the conversation is the legal agreements and the SHA and the SPAs of the world. And I saw that all the investors are more keen at the exit clauses. So the discussions are more in terms of how the exit is going to happen rather than what are the reasons for coming in. And even in the exit, it is IPO was never a consideration or never too much time was spent on the IPO part. The most of the time was spent on the non-IPO part of the conversation. So I perfectly resonate with him, at least in the last 5 years beyond, if I look at. Now maybe you would be spending more time on the IPO part.
It's actually interesting, right? I mean, that was one of the sort of comments on India, right? Oh, there's no exit strategy for India till a few years ago. And now as we see the flip. So Rishi, for you, given that you were part of Fino and the 18-year journey, how was the journey to get to that IPO? Like you said, when you were having these conversations on exit also, they were mostly about IPO was not even a consideration. So sort of how was the journey, and then what created that flip? Okay, now let's go the IPO route.
See, a lot of it goes with the DNA of the company. So we come from the old thinking background that the company has to be profitable, sustainable. End of the day, how much money you can raise from outside, and you have to generate money. That's the, you can say, the Baniya mentality which is there, and the mentality that end of the day you have to pay back to the investors. So I'll tell you one story. When we did one round with Blackstone in 2013, that time in a dinner table, I was sitting with my kids. I told them we raised this capital. To my younger one, who was maybe 8, 9 years old, that पैसे भी तो वापस करने हैं ना पापा. So that is the kind of thought process we come from, that we have to return back to our investors. So 18 years of journey, in the first few years, just building the company, let the company grow and raise capital to fund the growth, because taking money from public is a very different than privately. When you are in a private world, you handle a few investors, they understand you. You can talk to them, explain them. A few quarters here and there doesn't really make a difference. But when you're in IPO, you have to be in a mature stage where you can explain to the public at large, to the analysts, there are earning calls, and then there are hundreds of analysts and hundreds of investors there in the market. So the company has to be in a very mature stage, both from the point of view of their model. I would personally say from the profitability point of view, and should be in a model where they can predict. Predictive. Market needs consistency and stability. So if we fail on that piece, even if you're doing well, but a few quarters down, it can really impact you. So when we thought we are at a stage where the model has become more predictable, we are seeing consistent profits, and we did our own numbering, and we saw that for the next 3 to 5 years we are in a good zone. I think that was the time when we decided, okay, let's go to the market and see. And I would say timing is very, very critical, because end of the day, and you have to see what is the ecosystem also going right. Right now for startups is the best time, because you can see a lot of startups coming up. We went public in 21, and immediately after that, that startup story started to get affected, because most of the startups which in public at that point of time went with the story that we'll at some point will become profitable and we'll grow with profitability. But that did not happen for a couple of years. It's only in 24 when some of the big startups started to show profitability and started to turn around, when the startup ecosystem again went into the IPO zone. So timing is super critical. You need to get your investors, your employees, because governance is super critical. Again, just like your profitability, your model, I think market loves governance, compliance, and reputation. So if you think you are not reached that stage where you can declare your results on time, you don't have all the checks and balances which can help you grow in a manner where the market can really see you as a good governed company. I think that really, in fact, more than the profitability, governance is the key, I would say, because if there is a fault in the governance or there is some gaps, you can't bring it back very easily. Profitability still 1 quarter, 2 quarters, it can come back, but
So
not on the
question
other
for
side.
both of you, given that he's touched on something, how do you sort of then start prepping your companies from this perspective of governance or getting IPO ready, in terms of compliance and all? And then for you also in terms of, given that you had private equity investors, you didn't really have any venture funds from what I recall. How did your private equity investors work with you? So for both of you, this question sort of from different hats, one from the investor hat, one from the management.
So the stage at which we invest, I think these founders don't have much understanding of the corporate governance, compliances, and things like those, and we are aware of that. And therefore, we have a full team actually which works with these founders, tells them about the compliances and the importance of compliance, and works very closely. Whether they are seed or Series A or Series B, it doesn't matter. We believe that these compliances have to follow some calendar. There have to be certain things that will be done on time. Of course, there are initially there's a cost element that people try to avoid, and therefore we provide that external support, because if for early stage companies, if it's a cost issue, we provide that support from our side to make sure that compliances are not compromised. At the same time, if you are getting ready for the IPO, it requires yet another different set of mindset, because now you're making sure that even the smallest of the gaps that you have, you address those gaps. So then you follow a very different path in terms of ensuring that there's a lot of transparency, there is a lot of reporting that needs to be done, there is a lot of understanding of issues. So you start behaving as if you're already a company which has been IPO'd. So that's the focus at that stage. So we've worked with these founders, right before they are thinking of IPO, so that the mindset starts thinking like that. So there's a lot of focus from our perspective to make sure, because also you get a premium even if you're not going IPO, you are doing an M&A. You get a premium if you have actually taken care of all these things.
Fair enough.
Break this answer into one on the governance, and secondly, how do we work with investors to make it possible? So on the governance, I would say IPO is not an overnight thing. You have to really think at least for a year, maybe even more, because you have to get your board in place, you have to get your accounting in place, you have to get your reporting in place, you have to get your entire legal documents, sectorial documents, everything in place. So it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take time. And there's so much of disclosures which have to be done at the DRHP level. It's not easy. And then there are multiple auditors. In fact, multiple lawyers. In fact, I remember when we were going through an IPO process, we had some 6 or 7 lawyers who were there. There is a BRLM lawyer, then there is your own lawyer, then there's investor lawyers, then there is counterparty lawyers. So about 6, 7 lawyers were there in different zones. And then the entire IPO, we did some 120 odd investor meetings from 7 in the morning till 11 in the night, starting from Japan, Singapore to the West Coast. So you have to be ready. Your team has to be ready. And we were told that every meeting is important. So you need to be super active in every meeting. It's not like by end of the day you can say, okay, we can now relax. We have done 10 meetings, so we can be easy on the last 2 meetings. So you have to be super active, and you have to be, because you don't know who will be the new investor in the company. So from a governance point of view, any company which is thinking of going for an IPO need to really spend a lot of time, and at the CEO level, at the founder level, you will have to, because personally you sign those documents, your directors sign those BRLM or the DRHP documents. So that's the first part. I think on the second part, investors look at an exit, and IPO definitely is a good exit option right now, but it is a team which really makes it happen. And it is the conviction of the team, because end of the day, it is a team which is meeting the new investors, meeting the lawyers, meeting everybody. The investors may be at the back of it, but it is the team and the management which drives the entire process of an IPO. And so long they are convinced that we are in that stage that we need to go public. Obviously, the investors help you with some of the legal documents, getting the right banker in place, spreading the word, talking about your company to other peer investors. But eventually, when you face the music, when the rubber hit the road, it is the management which has to be convinced that this is the right time for them to go for an IPO. And I think that conviction comes from literally at the top level. And you should be in a position that you should be ready to answer any questions, and you have to prepare well for it. If you don't do that, you will be in a bad spot.
Okay, so then I have a follow-on question to that for both of you, but we'll start with you. How do you then maintain, like if you're preparing for an IPO, how do you sort of balance being still a young company that has to be sort of innovative and disruptive, and along with it, then for an IPO, predictable governance? I mean, there's a balance that you have to maintain. So how do you sort of keep that new age startup mentality with, okay, now we're also a big boy, like, so let's say you're somewhere in the middle between an adolescent, child, and adult. How do you?
This is a difficult question, if you ask me, because it is really difficult. And I have now nearly 12 quarters of post-IPO experience. Every quarter is a new quarter. On 30th September, we're pushing what is in this quarter. In 1st October, we said that is over. Now we start with a new quarter. I think in this startup, the expectation is something which has become really a very difficult thing, because the market is expecting that the company will grow with 20-30% growth, with 30-40% growth on the EBITDA or the PAT. I think that expectation is quite, I think it's only in India to some extent, but it is the expectation is quite high. In that piece, if you want to maintain your startup culture and also be an listed company, listing, I would not say slows you down, but what listing really does, and so we were fortunate, we were a bank before we went listed. So from a governance point of view or reporting point of view or processes point of view, we were already there. Over and above that, SEBI regulations, stock exchange regulations are new things for us also, and they're changing very fast. Post our IPO also, there are a lot of changes which has happened to align to those changes, and the board becomes very critical post the listing, because the independent directors, the number of committees you have to do, the amount of time, the amount of data which has to be seen, presented, represented, looked at, becomes complex. So it is a very difficult balance maintaining between maintaining pre-IPO stage monitoring and the way you used to work, and post-IPO. I think that is something which you learn over a period of time. It's not an easy pill, or it's not something magic pill which anybody can tell you and do it. Every company will do it in a different fashion. I think fortunately for us, because we were already a bank, so a lot of those things we were already built into the company. Over and above that, we had to look at stock exchange. But I think the ticker of your share price is like an addiction. So you have to be away from that addiction, and you have to focus on your performance and deliveries. And as I said, governance, consistency, stability, and no surprises, no failures, no surprises, I think is the key. Having said that, you will have to maneuver it internally. You have to balance between the two.
Fair enough. So Vikram, what's your answer? Given your company's like Snitch is not a, you know, in a way lucky or unlucky for him. He has regulation sort of governing a lot of things for him, but your companies are sort of new age where that may not be the case. So then how do you as an investor guide your companies, or what's your thought on this sort of maintaining the startup sort of mindset with?
It's and we've seen there is a substantial change in mindset required. So the moment you have to start thinking about an IPO as what you're going for, there are multiple things that you need to do. For example, once you change from a private company to a public company, I think there are a set of things that you have to suddenly change. Also, the founders are not used to, for example, sharing certain kind of information, not sharing other kind of information. All of a sudden, they have to coach and train that, you cannot now go and talk in the public certain things, so they're not used to that. So this kind of training is required. There's a proper systematic coaching is required for them. Of course, even from the board perspective, you have to do the composition as Rishi was saying, so you have to make sure that, so all these changes require a very structured, systematic approach. And therefore, these things take time, because there's actually a change of mindset which is happening. So I think it becomes more challenging if it happens too fast. And some of the startups actually grow too fast. So I can just give the example of Snitch. And if we start talking about IPO now, the company is just 3 years old, and it's already growing at that speed. And imagine if you had to go IPO in the next 2 years. On one side, the company is scaling so substantially month on month, and on the other side, they have to start preparing for all these things. So one has to balance between the two.
So how would you say they balance this out? Like what would be your
I think you have to bring in that additional bandwidth support, which will be very difficult otherwise for the founders and the team themselves to do on their own. So that support is required early on. In fact, of course, in this particular case, we are not yet talking about the IPO, but in case of Bluestone, which is already now filing for the IPO, there, the last 1 year itself, we've actually been working with the entire team to, make sure that all these changes happen. And there's a lot of support being provided to the team. Very basic things, even things like, what should be the minimum stake of the founders, under as they categorize the promoters. People might realize only at the time when they start thinking of IPO that you need a minimum 20% stake. And then they start thinking, oh, the founder doesn't have that stake. Then how do you ensure that you get that kind of stake, and you start talking to other people, whether they can be included in the promoter category and things like those. So there are these nuances that start showing up when you start thinking of an IPO. So in addition to a lot of other factors, including what kind of reporting, the board construct, the committees that you have to create, and of course all the filings that you have to do. So there are multiple things.
Fair enough. And let me ask you guys, given how our public markets are, and we have to, of course, touch upon that, where do you see the private markets sort of catch up with the public markets? Do you see a mismatch? What
I-
sort of your
When I think private market is still more overvalued than public market is my belief, because when I see some companies who are looking at not about $1 billion but 7 8 $10 billion, and then when we look at private market public market, I don't see that value coming to them in the short term. So I still believe private market is more valued than the public market. Having said that, the public market really turns around. If you look at the Zomato experience, from 45 rupees to 250 rupees, the turnaround happened when the market got the conviction that yes, they can do it, both on the growth and because they turned profitable. So Policy Bazaar, for that example. Nykaa still is at a lower level because still their profitability is not grown to the level one would like to be. So the market really values. So public market investors can give you money if you make a lot of money in profit and start paying dividends, because that is a question I get every earnings call: when are you going to start paying dividends? But we are a growing company, so we use the money for our own capex. But having said that, the private market can still give you a lot of value, even if you are growing but with lesser profits or with no profits. So that is where the twist, the change happens, and that is why some of the public markets may give you a higher value if you are profitable compared to maybe the private market. But private market may value the business model more, especially in a startup kind of environment.
Just to add to that, yes, totally agree, and I think also agree to the earlier comment of Rishi, which is about the timing. And I think as the founders are becoming more and more mature, I think investors are also becoming more and more mature. And if you look at the market in 2021, that was the first time the investors were seeing IPOs of startups, right? In that sense, so there were loss-making companies also, actually creating huge value, and people were surprised, that they couldn't understand how the valuation is being done. In fact, there was a time when the more the losses being made, the higher the value. So it was very difficult for people to understand what's going on. And I think, of course, from that time to now, obviously investors have also matured, and they've also understood how things are changing and how to really value these startups. And I think that has brought a lot more sanity amongst the founders as well. And I think that maturity curve has actually, been a little steep now in the last few years. Especially the founders have learned the profitability is the key, and also, it's not just about the growth. You have to make sure that you are bringing profitability. And therefore, even as VCs, we spend a lot of time understanding gross margins and scalability of these businesses and whether they can maintain those unit economics at scale. So we spend a lot of that time initially with these founders.
Just on the timing part, I think so when we were one of the last companies to get listed in 21, so our IPO when it was happening was Nykaa finished last day, Policy Bazaar opened, Policy Bazaar last day we opened, and when we closed last day, Paytm opened, and all this happened in 10 to 12 days before Diwali and just after Diwali. And then everybody got listed around 10 to 15th of November, and then the entire market took a U-turn on startups and everything went down.
Fair enough. No, timing definitely. So actually, sort of preempted a question I was going to ask you. So when given your portfolio, and like you said, you had 7 M&As, you have a couple of companies now that are sort of prepping for IPO. In your mind, I'm sure there are some that you still believe should take an M&A exit, some an IPO. What is, in your mind, which are the companies that should go for an IPO? I think Rishi sort of answered that question, but given you have you're sector agnostic, so you have companies from different sectors, different stages. So do you have some in your mind which companies you think should go for an IPO versus an M&A versus maybe a secondary sell to a PE fund?
As a VC fund, I always look for maximizing the outcome in terms of the value of the investment that we made.
What about building a legacy and these companies being around for 200 years?
Yeah, I think eventually, obviously, we manage third-party capital, right? So we've raised capital from the likes of State Bank of India and a lot of banks and insurance companies out there, and we've committed to return that money over a period of time. So actually, we have to find an exit, right? So for us, of course, we want to partner with these founders. Maybe we'll invest from our next fund, but one particular fund investment has to find an exit, right? So from that perspective, obviously the M&A discussion at the point of investment is actually a little hard because, as you rightly said, the founders are always thinking of a much longer time frame of investment. But the reason we put that as a criteria is because if founders are not ready for M&A, we still need an exit. There could be secondary possibilities, but secondaries usually don't give the best value outcomes because usually secondaries are done at discounts. Unless people are willing to invest, giving you a premium at secondary, which very rarely happens, which happens in our case in Purple, where we actually sold part of our stake in secondary at a premium. But I think most of the times an M&A exit would give you a premium on valuation because the multiples are usually better. IPO situation, you will obviously start tracking the profitability of the company and see whether there is a good story building up. And if you have a good story building up and if you reach the minimum threshold profitability numbers and growth numbers, I think you take a call based on what kind of exit outcome you can get on the exchange. So I think it's a call that you take. And I gave you the example of Snitch, and there are quite a few other companies in a portfolio which are now quite profitable. Landbox is started as a P2P platform, is an asset management company now. FinPay, which is a rural banking platform, is a very profitable companies now. And if you want to go list these companies, I think they should get good valuations. But I think you also need a scale. You need a minimum scale to list.
So that brings you to another question. There's the SME listing. Would you do you think some of your companies should list on the SME listing versus the main listing? Do you see any differences there? I mean, do you think that's a better route than, maybe going and getting raising private money from?
So we've been evaluating SME listing for a while now, and we've actually tested it a few times in terms of actually trying to go to market there. What we realized is that still it's not a very active exchange in terms of having the number of investors, and therefore you will have an impact on the valuation that you're looking for. But many people, what they try to do is that they list on SME exchange and stay invested in the company and then take it to main exchange over a period of time. That works. But if you're looking for an exit right away, it's really a call that you take because you still have to build the market there, and it may not necessarily be the best outcome from a valuation perspective.
Okay, fair enough. Like Rishi mentioned, it takes time. And I mean, what we've seen in India, it takes time to build these businesses, and whatever the exit may be, an M&A or IPO listing. Do you think, given now that the IPO markets have opened up, and of course we've seen exceptions where companies have listed in 5 or 6 years, like in the case of Mamaearth, but most of these have taken they've been a 10 plus year journey. What are your thoughts on how this sort of IPO journey goes? Does it sort of shorten the life cycle to exits, or sort of for good companies really to build, it's still going to take time, and we just need to understand and be patient? And
the IPO is a journey. IPO or getting listed is a journey, and it's not the end of the company. In fact,
not at all. I'm saying
and
just
lot of commitments and responsibility and expectations get built up with the listing. So I think when you think you are ready to take up those responsibilities, I think number of years post your starting business, I think it should not be the criteria. I think what is more important is the fact that is your business model sustainable enough that you can explain the model well. And because many times I have seen, especially in a payments business like ours, people really don't understand. Still, I have to face those questions. What does Fino do? And what is a payments bank? How is a payments bank different from a small finance bank? And what is a bank which doesn't lend? So you have to be ready to explain the business, the story which you are building. Your model has to be strong enough to, at least for the next 3 to 5 years,
Fair.
they should be able to grow, and expectations. Though while you don't put projections in the DRHP and you don't project anything, but with earnings call and lot of, not earnings call but investors call, they try to build up the model before investing. So you should be in a position that you can defend that model 3 to 5 years down. Obviously, in this world, in today's world, which is so dynamic, you can't predict what is going to happen 10 years or 20 years from now. But at least 3 to 5 year visibility is a good visibility. I think once you have that visibility, is the time for you to having other things
Okay.
being there.
But I think, interestingly, and I think this also goes to the earlier point you were making in terms of people flipping back to India. A lot of international investors are now coming to India. And if you look at globally, which is the exchange which is open? It's India, right? So there is no other option if even if people are looking to list elsewhere. So from that perspective, because of the traction that the Indian market is getting today, and I think hopefully this should continue for some time because I think obviously you never know how things work out. And this year, in fact, there were more than 30, 40 countries who actually went to elections, right? And we are also looking at US elections, and obviously it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I think it will also depend on what happens in the other markets in other geographies, right? How India market will play, because a lot of dollar capital is active in India. When US interest rates or the US deposit rates change, the India markets get affected significantly because dollars move accordingly. In 2022, what happened? SVB had a substantial issue, primarily because the interest rates went up in a very short period of time, from almost 0 to 5%. Primarily because a lot of money was printed in 2020 because of COVID. And all that led to huge inflation, and the interest rates had to go up, and that suddenly led to tightening of liquidity. And that had a huge impact on the Indian market. The 2022-23 led to a huge drop of investments. 85% of the investment in the startup ecosystem is dollar. And if the money goes back, so obviously the startups will face and will struggle to raise capital. Now I think the story is coming back because of the fact that the dollar money is flowing back into the system. And I think hopefully it will continue for at least a few more years.
You see another bubble that happened in 20 and 21 in the private markets?
I see 2021 was an aberration in my view, and it was an outcome of COVID in my view. As I said, $3.5 trillion was printed in the US. It was naturally supposed to lead to whatever happened in 2023, right? I don't think that is going to be replicated. India has very strong fundamentals as an economy and as a startup ecosystem, given that we are the third largest startup ecosystem, almost close to 150,000 startups. Look at the kind of Series A investments happening. And I think the government is actually now coming out in a big way, announcing a lot of incentives that, I think the biggest win was this long-term capital gains parity, while the public market actually faced the other side of it. The private investors actually saw that huge change from 20% to 12.5%. So there is that diversion of capital that you're going to see more and more happening into the private markets.
Fair enough. With this, I'm going to open it up for questions. I don't know if they have.
From my your answer, it's give me the clarity to do the dialogue with I'm going to delegation with CI corporate startup in UAE day after tomorrow. So every business model, innovation is foundation, but money and people is also material to building any business like high-rise building actually. In India, I like when you startup are going scaling, they require funding also. So India is normally cost of 15-20%, either it's a equity diluted or some money. So my question is IPO side, like India, there are a lot of some startup or SME, MSME, they are working on green tech, climate tech, something agri-tech. So can we have, when I have interaction to opportunity dialogue with the UAE summit, so I just want clarity. Like in SME actually, people are raising fund like 40-50 crores. And if somebody is a main board, there is a 5 years. Does we give the some future vision to some like UAE investor that if you invest Indian startup, like a Series A fund or Series B fund, when there is a capital to again they will have opportunity some exit on through SME, some getting funding and something either 5 years time there is a in IPO side actually. So whether you do see such opportunity, we have to connect two nations into this way.
So, interestingly, UAE has become very aggressive, trying to attract a lot of capital and also startups. In fact, they are giving a lot of incentives to investors to come to UAE, giving a lot of golden visas, etc. JITEX, which is now happening, probably you might be going there as well, which is actually one of the largest gathering globally of startups and investors. I think they are actually putting in a lot of focus on 2-3 areas. One is they're actually, government is putting funding, and of course Dubai is now coming ahead, even though most of the capital is flowing in from Abu Dhabi. And a lot of Russians are coming into Dubai, with putting a lot of capital into families, etc. But most of the capital is actually going to support local startups and any startups that are coming from outside of UAE region willing to come and set up in UAE. So for example, they are telling us that bring your startups to UAE and we will help them, we will give them red carpet treatment and all the investors required, we will open that up for these startups. Similarly, is ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, as a zone created in Abu Dhabi, which is actually, which has its own kind of a jurisdiction in terms of settling any issues over there. A lot of capital is actually now being channeled through that ADGM. A lot of funds are going and setting up there. A lot of Indian funds are going there setting up. People are even raising $1 billion plus kind of funds over there. They're catching up big time. Saudi is becoming very active. They're actually also looking to invest in the Indian startup ecosystem. A lot of funds are now raising capital from this geography. So yeah, I think UAE is becoming very, very hot, I would say, and you will see a lot more happening over the next 2 years. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So what are the things you look when you do M&A connection for a startup?
When we are looking to do an M&A of our startup, or so yeah, I think that's a very important decision from a startup perspective. Obviously there are multiple factors that have to be looked at. One is the company which is acquiring the startup should have a vision of acquiring. It should not be just a acquisition which is a structural acquisition or just being done for the sake of valuation and things like those. There has to be a vision, right? And the secondly, the founders who are getting acquired, I think they should feel comfortable about the acquisition, because usually the acquiring company would always set some guidelines that you'll have to work for at least 2 years and there are some incentives set up. So we sold Clovia to Reliance. So Clovia is a lingerie company and had done the best in its space as compared to other peers. And Reliance acquired it at a very good valuation. But at the same time, they had to offer incentives to the founders to deliver at least for minimum 2 years in terms of an upside in the valuation. They gave one valuation to the investors and then another valuation to the founders to make sure they were actually delivering even better than what they were delivering. So some of these things have to be done at the time of M&A.
I think we're done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any closing comments?
I think most of the you have a long list of questions. Most of the questions I think we have answered. But like I said, I like to reiterate again from my own experience from an IPO perspective. I think get the model right, get your employees motivated enough to run for the next 3 to 5 years with that same zeal. Get your compliance governance in place, and don't be in any rush. While timing is important, but you have to be ready to run. So don't get into the start line unless you are ready for it. If you are ready for it, then don't stop. But don't get into the start line without getting ready. I think that's the key.
I would say IPO is just an event, not the destiny. And it's important to know that, because many times when the founders are starting their business, they're like thinking, I want to take my company to IPO, and that sounds like a vision. And I think the vision has to be core to the business. What is the kind of scale that you're thinking of the business? IPO is just an event on the way. So founders need to be coached about that. So we actually talk to them about that off and on, make sure that they are aligned to that thought process. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I agree 100%. I say forget IPO. I say, we in the VCP world, we get very caught up with valuation. And I always say the best founders are the ones who actually say, okay, they focus on value creation, not valuation. And I think the valuation or the IPO or whatever happens next will come. It's like I joked and said, it's about building a legacy. And I see that, as I said, with really good founders, I mean, some of them I'm like, okay, which are the new companies? And they're just down working and building it. And it takes time. Like, I mean, that's
Yeah, I
and
look
it
at,
takes time. I
yeah.
think in India, at least, and even globally, right? Even a Facebook actually took 10 years. So I think the other thing we forget, we're always in a hurry. Unfortunately, there's that mismatch from an investor and reality that we don't see all the hard work or the failures. We just see the success. But
Yeah,
I-
you're talking about value versus valuation, and I will talk about values. Actually, I think that is
founder values.
absolutely. So I think many times people don't realize, if you have your core values are aligned to, governance and, transparency and integrity,
100%.
people don't realize that the kind of premium those values create is huge. And we've seen examples
I
of.
wish I could list a few founders here or mention them that I've truly seen them do that, and I think it governs and it shows ultimately, and you get the payout at the end. I guess we can conclude with that unless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A big round of applause for our panelists, and thank you, Tarana, for as usual having a very meaningful and engaging discussion with our panelists. Requesting Mr. Ninath Karpe to please come on stage and felicitate our panelists and the moderator, starting with Mr. Rishi Gupta, Managing Director, Fino Bank. Mr. Vikram Gupta, Founder, Ivy Cap Ventures Advisors Private Limited. And our moderator for the day, Tarana Lalbhani, Founding Partner, Innovent Triple Blue Capital Advisors LLP. So now we move on to, ladies and gentlemen, a final session for the day, which is of course a fireside chat on from startup dreams to reality, exploring the founder's journey of challenges and triumphs. For the same, requesting Ms. Naya Sagi, a co-founder, the Good Glam Group, founder Baby Chakra, to please come on stage and she will be in discussion with Mr. Ninad Karpe, Chairman, CI Western Region Subcommittee on Startups and Entrepreneurship, and founder and partner 100x VC. Yes, please. Over to Ninad, sir.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the last session. Fireside VR dot schedule. Don't you like it?
I think it's fantastic.
I am so happy to run a program which runs exactly on time. It's rare, but hopefully we'll have more of it. So welcome Naya, welcome back. It's becoming an annual affair. I had the last fireside with you around 13 months back, and now you have a baby at home, so you have some good things happening as well. So we've got 30, 40 minutes, and the whole idea is try to understand about your journey a little bit, give them things which they don't know, some lessons they can learn, and some interesting stuff where they go back with. You have inspired a lot of founders. I've seen you in the past, and hopefully this session also will inspire more. So let me start with, I've got a lot of questions, but what I'll do is I can keep chatting with her for a long time, but I'll ask one or two questions, and if you'll have anything to ask her, raise your hand. I'm not going to wait till the end to allow you to ask questions. Anytime you feel like asking, raise your hand. I'm going to decide whether you ask or not, but you can certainly raise your hand. I'm the boss for the time being in this house. So let me get going. Naya, I believe you have done law, then you're in McKinsey, all the good things in life, then at GVK Imara and PHF. This was a journey which, obviously would have taken to a different path. And then you dropped all of that and started Baby Chakra. Why? Why would you do that?
So first of all, it's a real honor being here. And Ninad, it's always a pleasure talking to you. In fact, I'm planning to grill him on a few questions as well through this conversation. It shouldn't just be one-way grilling. But, just very quickly to summarize my journey, I wrote about this recently. Actually, I write a lot on LinkedIn because I find that an outlet. So I wrote about how I find all our lives to be a series of many journeys, right? And I certainly count my journey as well. And, I look back and I'm like, I'm lucky to have those experiences. But, I was sharing with someone offline, I actually grew up in Calcutta. My parents were in the government. My mum was in the civil services. We are Punjabi, but we grew up in Cal. And we picked up Bengali on the go. And our dinner table conversations were all about, how do you, if you lead one life, how do you lead a life of impact and a life of meaning? And then from there, I went on to NLS, like you correctly said, National Law School, Bangalore, where again, there was a lot of focus on human rights, international humanitarian law. In fact, fun fact, I was, one of my internships was in the International Bar Association, where I was helping train the judges for the Iraqi Special Tribunal that were trying Saddam Hussein. So that was the journey I thought I was on. And then McKinsey came to campus and they said that we're going to be, hiring for people who can help us build out the next wave of companies and the next wave of public-private partnerships. And that, in that context, Ninad, is when I experienced firsthand three, I think, incredible journeys to scale. And I saw the teams build it out, and I was just a very small part of it, but it was very, very inspiring. One was 108, the ambulance service provider. The vision there was, how do you build a 911 type ecosystem for India? The second was the Public Health Foundation of India, which was building out centers of excellence in chronic care, infectious disease, cardiovascular disease, CVD. And the third was actually with the Gates Foundation, where we were building out maternal and child health projects for India and the whole nutrition strategy. And that's really where I saw the power of communities play out on the ground, right? Where you have communities of care, when they come together, the right healthcare intervention at the right time, you have the best healthcare outcomes for communities on the ground. HBS happened, Harvard Business School happened after, and that's where I saw the power of technology to scale interventions and solutions at scale. So to cut a long story short, when you think back, it's all of these experiences that made me want to come back to India and build out Baby Chakra. And that platform was to basically build out communities of care, taking maternal and child health at scale. And at our peak, we had 25 million mothers and 10,000 doctors on our platform. Every, 8 minutes, we'd say a Baby Chakra baby is born. And we'd say Ghar Ghar Baby Chakra. So that really is the inspiration.
Well, I'm happy you came back.
I'm very happy to.
So do you use Baby Chakra for your babies as well? You eat your own dog food?
Yes, I do. Of course, I do. So with our older one, Arya, I'm a do bachcho ki maa, which feels very strange sometimes. But our older one, Arya, is 5.5. And, when I was building Baby Chakra, it sometimes helps to not be a consumer because you learn from a lot more openly from other consumers, right? And you co-create with them. But I realized the power of what we were building when I had Arya. And it was fantastic. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, when you're up at night, you're feeding your child, or, you're riding about in pain from like the lower back pain that you have when you're pregnant, to see this community of mothers, then to be able to ask questions without fearing judgment from doctors, right? On what am I going through? Have other mothers tell you their experience, but more importantly, also have a very predictive, almost like a surrender-precious platform. We built it on the back very early in the day on the back of ML and learning algorithms, a little bit before our time, I think, where it was almost like they were able to cohort me into a working mother, into an urban mother, into the mother of a first-time mother, right, cohort, and then introduce me to the right set of communities, the right set of care, and the right set of content at scale was, for me, actually pretty cool to see play out. So yes, I've certainly eaten my dog food.
Great. So just throw some statistics. How many people use your platform, and what is the impact you've made in terms of numbers?
So as I mentioned,
not the financial number, I'm just saying in terms of.
Yeah, no. So at our peak, as I mentioned, we were in 25 million mothers. We had a community of 10,000
Just
doctors.
give a round of applause. 25 million mothers is fantastic.
And I think it was great, and it is great. I think if you ask me hand on heart, I still believe that this whole maternal and child health problem needs still to be solved. We're undergoing a tectonic shift as a society today, as a country today. And I've been saying this ad nauseum since 2015, ever since my first pitch, but the reality is that all of us today, 70% of us live in nuclear families today, right? And that paradigm of care, the traditional sources of care are completely broken. And so more than ever, Ninad, I feel that today we still need more and more solutions, not just one Baby Chakra or one XYZ, right? We need a lot more solutions that address this at scale.
Sure. So, I've been meeting her, Naya, for a long time, and I've lulled her into thinking that I'm going to ask only easy questions. The tough ones are going to follow, but she's made it tougher for me, saying she has questions for me, which is not allowed by the rules, but I'll allow her that as well. Suppose you're a 20-year-old Naya today. What would a 20-year-old Naya tell a present? Don't want to know your real age, but what would
I'm 2x that, just multiply by 2. That's my age. I'm 40.
So what a 20-year-old would say, present day Naya, do this, don't do this. You're doing this wrong. You're not using AI. You're not doing, I'm just saying, don't.
I do think about that a lot because I'm constantly still learning on this journey, Ninad. And what I would tell myself is just unlearn a lot. We grew up, and genuinely speaking, as women, we grew up with so much conditioning about what we can do and what we can't do. Then there's this whole thing about, oh, this person's older, so definitely has more experience than me, right? There's this whole third paradigm of saying that, this is my scope of play, my expertise. This is what I need to build my life in. I think the biggest lesson I'd give myself is, just unlearn all of that conditioning all of us have been through. And just start every journey that you do with a very fresh perspective. And the second thing I'd say is have belief in yourself. You know, the one big thing, and I need to tell you this, Ninad, like I always thought that these people you see in the news, on TV, when you meet them, right, you see them on stage, that they're very different. You know, they must be cut of a different cloth. You know, they're really super intelligent. You realize everybody goes through the same struggles. Everybody, I mean, of course, everybody is assumed, and all of us have a basic level of IQ, and then, of course, we build on our EQ through the journeys and honestly, the failures we have. But I think there's something to also be said about, the fact that there's also a lot of luck at play, a lot of serendipity at play. So, I think the second thing I would tell myself is that if I were younger, which I wish I was always, but is that have belief in yourself. You can go out and build whatever you put your mind to.
Great. So I'm going to ask one more question. After that, if anyone wants to ask, please raise your hand. I'll come there. Okay. So you mentioned about, your struggle or so everyone is human is what she said, whoever you see in the newspaper or headlines is ultimately a human being and has the same kind of emotions and struggles. As a woman founder, what are the struggles you face? I'll specifically ask you, and I'm kind of hitting on my own, shooting in my own foot. There is something called a bro code in the tech industry particularly and VC industry, where bros are drinking together, having a smoke together, moving out together. Is that true? And how did you face any of this kind of barriers when you're raising capital?
So let me break it down into two pieces, right? One is that while raising capital, I mean, the numbers are out there, right? Less than 2% of women founders get venture funded, which is unfortunate, but that I think is changing now as we speak. But, a lot of that is also, unfortunately, based on past pattern recognition. Now, I kind of also understand where a lot of the venture funds and fund managers come from because, they base a lot of their assessments on what they have seen to be successful in the past. Now, unfortunately, the past was largely predominantly male founders. So I think now they also are learning that they're building for the future. The future is very different. And they are also reassessing how they assess companies and they assess founders and their styles of functioning and their styles of leadership. So I think that is changing, not fast enough, but it's changing. I think the second piece, just from a personal context, and therefore, what does that mean for me? When I have gone fundraising, I have been asked by investors, what happens when you become pregnant? My first pregnancy, I didn't actually tell anybody I was pregnant for the longest time until I was showing. My second pregnancy, I was confident enough to talk about it with everybody, right? I think that is a change that we all go through ourselves as founders as well. And when we are thinking about raising money and having, other shareholders on our cap table. I think the piece on tech, the Bros Club, right? I think again that is changing, Ninad. Yes, you're right. There is a certain comfort, and by the way, I also, in some sense, empathize with men because they don't know how to deal with strong women. A lot of men don't know and have not had strong, opinionated, very ambitious women in their lives. So they don't know how to deal with it. And it's not just women who therefore need to make that change to find the entry and not to have a tech bros club but to have a tech club or whatever else. But even men are making those adjustments today, right? Even they are also moving on that paradigm. And just to give you an example, right? I see Rishi here. We're part of this community called the Tech Entrepreneurs Association of Mumbai, which represents the $60 billion tech entrepreneurs ecosystem building out of Mumbai, right? And we're really building it out to be the center of excellence, like Mumbai and Maharashtra to be the center of excellence for innovation, entrepreneurship, etc. When I attended the Mumbai Tech Week in February this year, which was absolutely fantastic, I found very few women in the audience and participating. And while I was, I think, 7 months pregnant at that point in time, Ninad, when we held the governing council elections for team, I decided to stand. Because I said, if we want more women to come and attend and be part of these tech communities, they need to see women on the governing council. They need to see women founders who are leading the mandate and who are watching out and saying, how do we get more women into our panels, into our, into our audience, into the hackathons, etc. So I think a lot of us also have that responsibility, the women, of course, but equally the men, to ensure that we have a much more equal representation and do away with this whole notion of tech bros.
Okay, great. I'm going to walk inside there and ask questions so that I'll motivate some people to ask you questions. I'm going to step out of the startup world and ask you a very general question. Women's safety. You know, it's headline news today, and for the right reasons. Unfortunate, you had some incidents. Do you think startups can do something on that? If anyone has any question, please raise your hand. I'm in the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
I actually think it's not genuinely, right? I in my worldview, I would normally say startups can solve for everything. But I think this requires a lot more concerted and effort. So I actually, after the horrific rape happened in my hometown of Calcutta, I grew up in Calcutta. I've lived in Bombay for the last many years, but this was my home. I actually went back to my law school network, to my McKinsey network, to my founder network, and I said, what can we do? And I realized that while the laws are what they are, and in fact, like I was like, do we need to have even more punitive a punishment? Like, does a death penalty really need to therefore be implemented, etc.? I think it came down to saying that 70% of all rapes actually happen, or sexual harassment cases happen with and amongst people who are known to us. It happens behind, like in families, in homes. So essentially, it comes down to saying that, and I gave this example when I was speaking recently, Ninad, at the IAS Officers Academy in Missouri, where, like pulse polio, where where the nation came together, the government came together, families came together, state and central were talking, कि बस polio को हटाना है, right? 20 years it took for us, but it happened. There needs to be a similar wide-scale social engineering, mass education, and behavior change movement, powered hopefully by technology, but only it's an enabler, not the answer, that can happen on women's safety in India. And then we should stop at that point in time as a nation and talk about it at a global platform and say that India solved for women's safety in public spaces and private spaces to the extent that it did. But it requires a mass movement.
Well, it's a serious topic, and obviously we've made some interesting points. There is a question here, but as I go along there, let me ask you a question and hand over the question. Work-life balance. You mentioned about pregnancy, and you didn't mention to our investors initially. I mean, that is tough. Is work-life balance more tougher for a women founder?
So I really wish some men were being asked this question as well, Ninad. You put me in a spot, but I actually talk about it as work-life integration. And I think in my case, my husband and I, my partner and I are extremely, very, very equal in the way we think about raising our children. Also, and how we divide and conquer responsibilities at home and with childcare. Also, of course, the minute we have a little bit of money or resources, then we actually over-index on people taking care of the house, people taking care of our, while doing the basic tasks and chores that are required with our children. So I think, so that piece is somewhat taken care of between Sandeep and I. And we're the part, we are the unit, right? So it's for both of us to kind of divide and conquer on that front. I think the other piece is I just don't know any other paradigm. I grew up with a mother and a father who were very equal and who were very ambitious as well. And they're still, by the way, extremely ambitious. They've retired, but mama's on a bunch of boards. Papa's writing all the time on maritime issues, right? So work is just part of who we are. I don't know any other paradigm. So this whole work-life balance for me does not exist. It's always been integration.
Work-life integration. Yeah, we have the first question here.
Ma'am, Shiv Khera has famous comments like, winners don't do different, they do things differently actually. So as you already have experience to scale your business, so I have a question like, sometimes we have different startup has different area of business. Do you think that after some pilot success, every startup has to scaling to any country, doesn't focus on only India, because some scaling is not possible in India, because now every country is encourage startup to so they have to land there either in some of the Europe country or some Australia, US, Canada actually, because time is very important, because any startup actually, if time is missing, then the spirit of team is. So what is your advice about it? And second thing about women's safety actually, is I think that as I am part of the lot of research innovations, and once Nirbhaya Kand was happening in Delhi actually, and that time there was a technology, but sometimes India is not getting support. Like there is a voice AI technology, whereas there is a you can develop the device, if because there is something happen, only one word is sounded, bachao, help me in anything is possible if something innovation is culturally adopted in vast India, then people are, something they are fear to do something. So how such kind of culture is Indian, whether India has a that mindset to, pilot to environment to set up, or it's going to be valid in other country. Thank you.
So thank you for the questions. I'll just take your second question very quickly first, and I'll go on to the first. We have something called the Safe Cities program. This was actually orchestrated, and we have state budgets allocated. I think Maharashtra has a 250 crore budget still pending to be allocated to this, which was done after the Nirbhaya case, right? And this has been signed on, and signatories. I mean, all the states, the major cities are also, by the way, signatories, right? So part of that is one, educating the police force, right? And having special women task forces and teams put up, chauki par to ensure that women's safety is taken care of. And number two, CCTV cameras. Because while you may not be able to preempt, at least you can do faster remedial action in case of, in the public spaces, if anything is, if a woman is attacked or if a woman's safety is compromised. I think there's still, while we're doing a generative AI hackathon on the back of the NVIDIA Summit, team is a part, some of us are jury members, etc. And one of the topics I have planted personally is, under social good is women's safety. And I believe technology can play a big role. I think even simple things like this can play a disproportionate role. So, I always tell even myself and my team that, we think that tech is the magic bullet. No. It is our behaviors, our adoption, and our ability to digest the technology and apply it naturally in our daily lives that is the magic bullet. Right? So that's just to answer your second question. On the first, so my second company is the Good Glam Group, which Ninad mentioned, and that is a beauty and personal care conglomerate where we power our brands. And we have My Glam, which is the largest direct-to-consumer color cosmetics play in Asia. We have Momsco, Baby Chakra, which are mom and baby product companies. We have Sirona Hygiene, a female sexual health and wellness hygiene company. We have Organic Harvest. We have a few amazing brands. But as entrepreneurs, we all dream ki hum ek din, like we're building in India, but we're building for the world. This is our dream. So we actually launched in the US earlier this year. Some of you might have caught the news. We did a JV with Serena Williams, who of course I think everybody knows, and there's a lot of respect for her globally. And we did our first mainstream US beauty launch with a product called Wing Beauty. And why do I say it's mainstream US? Because it's not कि India के products हम US में लेकर बेच रहे हैं. This is actually a product range, color cosmetics range that was formulated for the US audience. And we launched it across 750 stores of Ulta, which is the second largest beauty retailer in the world after Sephora. So you're absolutely right. I think all of us have global ambitions from get-go. And, one more statistic I'll leave you. If you look at Amazon's exports from India to the US, and, only the Amazon, only the marketplace exports, it's at $5 billion already. So Indian entrepreneurs are already going global. It's not like we need to go there. We're already there.
Great, that's an amazing story. Please give a big round of applause.
Ninad, you can't force them to applaud for me. That's not fair.
That's the only way they'll motivate you. But I'm sure Manas, of course, is on the call. But Kerala Banana Chips, he'll get some tips from you on how to go to the US market. Yeah, the next question is from Amit. Yeah.
Thanks, Ninad. Naya, truly inspirational to see such kind of an inspirational woman leadership. My name is Amit. I run a wellness company, but in the other world, I also am a United Nations ambassador for He for She campaign, and I have mentored nearly 20 women leaders in India. And I'll try to break into what is the pattern that I've seen in this 20 women leaders that I have mentored. Often in Hindi, they say, "Aurat ki sabse badi dushman aurat hoti hai." Right. This is the common trend that I have seen, and I'll try to break it into two parts. And I need a perspective because that will also
give a perspective
that will also give fire to the fire chat. So they say that we often male bash by saying male VCs are not investing in women's led startups, or for that matter of fact, men leaders are not hiring enough women colleagues in the organization. I'll try to put a twist to it. You as a inspirational and established women leader, how many women-led startups would you like to invest in, for that matter of fact? And if you find the really smart, ambitious, fierce women leader in your team, how do you deal with it? Because that will also set a context for a lot of people over here as to how to deal with those situations.
No, thanks, Amit. I do not agree with that. I do not agree with it at all. But that is a perspective. I mean, you have experience, so you have your truth. I have mine. But I do angel invest. I angel invest very selectively because I don't have time to manage some of the investments I do. Right, and I think if I do a commitment, I follow it through. But all the investments I've done, except for 3, are all in women founders. And they are fantastic. Those are the best performing investments I've had. And they've had follow-up investments from folks like Founders Fund, Peter Thiel, Khosla Ventures, General Catalyst. So they've done really well, right? So I am definitely putting my money where my mouth is, to put it bluntly. Also, in terms of our team at Good Glam, now, of course, please do remember we're also a specific segment, which is obviously also focused on women. So there is a bit of a bias there. But we have about 60%, 65% of our operating teams being women. And even at the leadership level, there's about 40% women. So I think we see it play out in our paradigm for sure, Amit. And there needs to be more done. Now, I think the other place where there's a lot of work that we end up doing, and I personally also am very passionate about working on, is also evangelizing stories of other women entrepreneurs. Because when I go to colleges and I go to schools and I interact with the young generation, if you ask them, I went to IIT Bombay ECEL, the event they have every year, and I was asking the audience, I was like, how many women do you have in your batch this year? And they said this, Nina, they have 25, 30% now this year. IAS Academy, I was speaking at Labasna, the 675 IAS, IPS, IRS, new recruits, right? The UPSC graduates. 33% women. 33% women. So the numbers have shifted. Highest women in STEM globally is in India, right? So you're seeing that inflow. But when you ask that audience, name 5 women, name an entrepreneur, on who are your role models, or name 5 women entrepreneurs.
They don't know.
They don't know. Now that narrative is something that we're also looking to change. Right now, how are we doing it? We did a lot of mass media work around this with Mint. You've probably seen it, women changing the narrative. We've done this with, building out WhatsApp communities. We have something called the Female Founders Group with more than 210 women founders of different stages, right from me and Upasna and Ghazal and Vineet, like all of us, right, on to like younger founders on that group. So we are doing our bit. A lot more needs to be done. And also, I need to say this, it cannot be done in an echo chamber. My biggest, I think, partners, my biggest supporters have actually been men. Because this discussion needs to be mainstreamed. It can't just be me and like my kind, like talking amongst each other. Change won't happen.
Okay, so if you have any question, raise your hands. But in the meantime, give the mic to him. I'll ask a question, then come back to you. Quick commerce. What is your view? Will it overtake e-commerce? Will the Zeptos and Blinkits of the world as a, I'm not saying
it's an out of syllabus question. It only discussed nahi kiya tha, Ninad. No, but like, I mean.
Just to hold on, I'll let her respond. So there are, as VCs, and Manas is sitting there from Kerala Banana Chips. He will tell you how quick commerce is done well for him. Isn't it, Manas?
Yeah. I mean, food. All the food startups I know, their 40-50% of sales and revenue now comes from quick commerce. And that's happened in less than 1.5 years, 2 years, right? Personal care, the entire shift has already happened. For all of us, 20-30% of our revenues now comes from Q-commerce. And the best part is, if you really look at the way quick commerce is evolving, and it's evolving in a very agile way, right? Because the founders are hungry, right? They are building something new. It's a new paradigm they're playing in. The larger marketplaces are getting a little bit more, they're trying to figure out how to catch on to this trend, but they haven't built up that massive infrastructure that they built out with their warehousing, logistics, supply chain, the entire delivery operations. These folks have built it for this paradigm, right? So, I mean, I definitely think quick commerce is, frankly, the future of commerce.
So, in which year will it overtake the traditional e-commerce company, or it will not?
I think in certain categories, it will overtake in the next year, year and a half.
Wow.
In certain categories, please don't hold
Manas,
me
you
to
heard
it.
that? Year and a half. It will take what? Okay, there's a question, this gentleman.
Hello.
Rishi, if you have any questions,
this is
please
Sanjay.
feel free.
I was working in Tata Group and now working at tech company. My wife is a chartered accountant and she is also working in a one of the top company. And my only question is that do you think that post maternity the clauses is 6 months now? Do you think that it is to be extended provision for next 6 months? Because in India, if you see the after marriage, after the child care for a 1 year, it at least required for a woman. Okay, to take care, it is a 6 months is not the right time. Maybe is it required provisionally? Maybe 6 months is with pay. Beyond again 6 months, maybe without pay, that kind of provision to be done within the Indian industry so that the dropout rate of women should be higher.
Sure.
Okay, matlab it should be
Fair question, yeah.
balance it out in within
Sure,
the industry.
I'm sure you got it.
No, I think it's a very important question because, topics like this, by the way, don't come out in mainstream conversations and places like this. And I think first of all, thank you for bringing out the topic of childcare. I appreciate that very, very much.
I won't tell people to applaud now.
No, but it is important, right?
Yeah.
Because, we just think, this should only happen in a certain
True.
setup. But I'm very happy that we're talking about it. See, I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer, right? It works both ways. If you're away from the workforce for 6 months, then when you come back, there's a lot of learning and catch up you have to do already, right? And then 1 year might, in some cases, make it even tougher for the woman to integrate seamlessly into the workplace and then kind of find her journey to her ambition. I think the question that we need to think about is where is the man in the equation? Because where is paternity leave? How does that man play that role? And in the US, it's now become fairly normative for men to actually, take that time out from their workplace and be really an equal partner so that the family as a unit bounces back faster. Right? So I think paternity leave is a narrative that we need to be discussing more and more in forums such as these, where all of you are decision makers and can influence the journey of your organizations and frankly, therefore, of the country. I think the second piece to think about is the childcare resources. Again, a question I keep on asking ourselves is, can a startup solve that problem? Because how do you have high trust childcare at scale? And of course, corporates do set up creches, etc., but then they have to be economically viable. You have to have enough critical mass of people who are availing of those services. So I think that piece is still something that needs to be solved. Again, I think it requires a public-private partnership. Honestly, if we could solve for DPI at the scale that we did, digital public infrastructure, what we built out in India is the first that's happened globally. We can certainly solve for childcare.
Well, that's the quote of the day. Huh? It's very interesting. Yeah, Rishi has a question, so just go there.
So I have the mic. So two questions. One is in terms of moving from Baby Chakra, which was your own company, to Good Glam, which is a group, and you became a co-founder. So how was that change for you? One is that. And secondly, for the benefit of the audience, if you would like to talk a little bit about the Mumbai startup, that effort of team in building up the Mumbai startup, I think that would be nice for everybody to hear.
Thank you, Rishi. I really appreciate the second question in particular. And you should join me, by the way, in talking about the efforts that we all have. But I think the first piece, right? And how many of us are founders here? Could you raise your hand? Okay, great. So, I think the first, almost like Vidai, if you will, of our first company is a very, very emotional moment. And I'm quite a practical person in some sense, but just to sort of see it getting centralized in the group, having other people be its custodians and caregivers, and looking at its growth, very, very emotional. And I think the other piece was a very steep learning curve for me. We went from a very like maybe a 60, 70 max at our peak, like 100% team, because we were very product focused always, right? So digital products. So you normally have a very amazing kick-ass team of engineers and product and UI UX folks, and not so much in marketing and branding and all the other stuff. I didn't even know all of this. And then from there, you suddenly go to joining a group, which is, then rapidly scaling to like 1,000, 1,500 people. And you're the co-founder. So I think there was in the beginning, I felt a little bit of an imposter syndrome as well. Right, because I was like, do I have the right to lead all of these people? You know, how do I earn my chops? And then that moving on to saying, now how do I make the people who I'm building with feel excited and energized? And also we were doing a lot of acquisitions at that point in time, Rishi, you might remember, right? So how do we build trust in the ecosystem, the community that is Gutlam? So I think that is really the phase I would say in all candor I went through as a founder, going through that transition. Now to the second point that you made, which is, and you need to join me on that. So, you know, the Tech Entrepreneurs Association of Mumbai is actually a very, very new organization. It's a non-profit. We're registered. And it was, you know, kicked off just about 2 years back. And it came together almost like a voluntary movement of founders who were building in Mumbai and was saying that, you know, while we talk a lot about Bangalore and the tech ecosystem and the innovation hubs there and startups all being around certain, you know, geographies or certain cities, Bombay actually has a lot of innovation already happening. We're the gaming capital, the fintech capital, the beauty personal care capital, the healthcare capital, entertainment, thank you. Education, thank you. Capital of India. But there's not much that people know about it. So when people are making choices to move to cities, right, to build their careers from an engineering perspective, from a product perspective, from a, you know, a market, whatever, other different job profiles, right? They all think about Bangalore, they think about some other cities, right? How do we make Bombay the innovation, the ecosystem hub of India? So that is the mission we started off with. Rishi, do you want to add a few points?
So when we had our first meeting between about 10-12 people when we were starting up this team, we didn't have a name also at that point. We were just 10-12 founders. We got around one evening and we decided we need to do something. When we were going around all the founders, we saw one thing which was common, and that was profitability. I think that was really the difference which we saw. The Mumbai, maybe the Gujarati, Marwari, Baniya culture which is there was a very building businesses with sustainability, and I also spoke about it. I think that was common. I think out of the 12 founders we had, or 12 companies, I think 10 companies were profitable. If you look at any other city, maybe even Bangalore has the maximum loss. If somebody looks at the data of companies or the startups which are there in Bangalore, I think maximum loss companies would be there. So that was one area which we saw was a very differentiating factor for Mumbai tech startups. And I think one thing which we realized is that the infrastructure of Bombay and the cost of living of Bombay was something which was discouraging a lot of startups to work in Mumbai. But I believe with the new coastal road and new startups, new infrastructure things which are coming up in Mumbai in the next 3 to 5 years, I think that to a large extent we gets resolved. The cost of living is definitely expensive, but with this cost of living also we are profitable. So I think that makes us very differentiated, and that's where the team effort is. And we would encourage more and more people to talk about it, is to build up the entire team, Mumbai as a big technology startup of the country.
And just to build on where Rishi left off, and thank you, Rishi, for that. We're also, by the way, working in collaboration, right? I mean, I've shared one of the theses that I hold very dear, that is that tech can't solve all the problems in the world, right? It has to be a collaborative effort. So we're actually working very closely with the government, the state government. We're working with, you know, other sort of policy makers. We're working with corporates at scale. We're working with other, of course, startup founders at different scales as well. So there is a lot of collaboration in the work that's happening at team. And, you know, just a few examples, you know, Ninad, if I may, sure. You know, so end of this month, we have the AI Summit, the NVIDIA AI Summit, where Jensen Huang himself is coming down. And it's a milestone event, I think, for the overall sort of venture startup Gen AI ecosystem. And, you know, of course, he's coming to Mumbai and team is a partner, right? On the back of that, we are doing the largest, and we are trying to enter the Guinness Book of World Records with this. And team is putting this off with the backing of NVIDIA and Meta. We're doing the largest generative AI hackathon where we're solving for 4 different tracks. One of them is social good, of which, if you remember, I've put in safe cities as well. And that is, you know, looking to enter the Guinness Book of World Records by having the largest amount of engineers, business talent, enter and run these hackathons for a period of 48 hours continuously. So there's a lot. And of course, we have the Mumbai Tech Week, where we showcase all the innovation and we bring in the top leaders from across the country and across the world to come and talk about innovations in tech. and how can the Mumbai Maharashtra ecosystem really be part of that play. So there's a lot that we're doing at team in terms of really building the community, but also evangelizing and bringing in new ideas into the Mumbai tech ecosystem.
Damn good job you guys are doing. I knew about it, but no, nice. So there's time for one last question. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going, rolling. Yeah, someone has raised a hand. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, it is a fantastic session. I have a question about work-life integration you spoke about, from work-life balance to work-life integration. Your family works as a unit, but there are many more families who doesn't believe in family as a unit. And then the other partner somehow is not ready to understand. Making somebody understand is difficult. So at that time, maybe the woman has to stand for herself. What will be your suggestions as a third party person to such a family lady? What she should do?
You know, you've put me on the spot. I don't have a suggestion per se because, you know, I really believe that every relationship, every family unit is so unique in their own way. And I truly believe in problem solving coming from within, right? The minute you get an external person involved, I think I don't know, I think it makes the problem worse. That's my belief. But what I would definitely say is that, you know, again, there are two things I do that help me in difficult situations, right? One is I actually go back to my younger self. And I think about my ambitions, my aspirations, what I want my life to be. And if I feel at any point in time, I feel like I'm compromising on those dreams. And by the way, it's not just my dream alone. My parents, my sister, my grandparents have put in so much behind my journey. I don't stand on my feet. I stand on the backs of my family, right? So if I go back to that time and I'm like, if I feel like I'm selling myself short or someone is just not making me dream, like fulfill my ambition, then I need to understand whether I'm in the right equation. Because I'm doing myself and all the hopes of people behind me a disservice.
Yeah.
I think the second piece to it is that, you know, we only have one life to lead. And at the end of our lives, when we look back, did we spend it the way we wanted to? Or did we live a life of compromise all our lives? These are the two thoughts I would just leave with you. And I don't know an answer because every situation is so different. And maybe the answer is that, no, I want to compromise and I want to stay in this equation. Maybe that's the answer. But then, end of your life, are you okay to live with it? Think about that, whoever it is, and make a judgment accordingly. Work outside in.
Right.
That's Naya for you, all very frank and honest. Now, I haven't told them to apply, but they're clapping in their own.
The next session is over.
It's not over. I've got last question. And you know, I always end with a rapid fire question. So that's going to come at the end. I want to pull you back to your entrepreneur journey. And, you know, what are some of the myths you want to debunk? You know, people look at you, people look at, you know, let's say Rishi, people look at Manas, they say, oh, great guys. They're in the news that talking with so much energy and they are getting this kind of valuation. And I keep telling students, entrepreneurship is a tough journey. But you need to debunk some of the myths. And of course, motivate as well, but first debunk.
No, I think there's enough that's been said about, the fact that there is this very random glamour around entrepreneurship, which I don't know whether it really merits. But you know, on the flip side, honestly, now let me tell you this, right? I'm actually happy there is a little bit of glamour, and I'll tell you why. When I started off my journey in 2015, right, everybody was like startup, like venture, entrepreneurship. क्या कर रहे हो life के साथ, right? Harvard गए हो, you know, US में थे, अभी वापस आकर क्या बना रहे हो, right? ये क्या baby chakra बना रहे हो? Like it was that, right? So it was very tough. So I think right now we have a lot of tourists in the startup ecosystem because they're seeing the glamour of startups and they're like, चलो हम भी startup बनाएंगे. But the good thing is, as part of those tourists, there will also be settlers. There will be people who will come in and say, now I will unlock, and I have this unique consumer insight that will unlock a lot of value for where India is going, for my demographic, and for myself and my teams. So I think overall, that glamour kind of has attracted a lot of people, but I think there's a lot more to be untapped there and unpacked there as you think about the tourists versus the settlers, right? Now, I mean, to cut a long story short, I mean, there have been enough and more failures also, right? And every day, actually, if you look back, there are more failures than successes and wins.
But that's the startup ecosystem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the one big reckoning that I would love for us to now think as the next future forward trajectory for all of us is to start celebrating the failures also. Because when we do that, we truly unlock a very different risk appetite to make that leap and then to fail and fail honorably when we do that. You know, US has this. The US has this. India does not have it. India में अभी भी शर्मा जी क्या बोलेंगे अगर आप fail हो जाओगे. That is still unfortunately the norm.
Not as yet, hopefully.
It needs to change.
Okay, hopefully that change will happen. We have had a lovely conversation. It doesn't end without a rapid fire. She hasn't seen the questions which I've asked, and I subjected it to her a year back now again, and hopefully after 12 months again. So this rapid fire, she knows the rules. I have given her two options. Don't get stressed.
Where's the hamper?
Coffee with Karpe. Huh? Not, I'm sure you'll come on Coffee with Karan at some point. But she has to respond within 2 seconds. You can't say neither, both, no comments. No. So very easy. You know how it goes. Scale fast or build sustainably.
Build sustainably.
Build sustainably. Bootstrap or fundraise.
Depends.
So that is not allowed.
Depends.
So baby chakra. So bootstrap.
It was funded. Both are funded.
Okay, fine. So winning idea or strong execution?
Execution.
Strong execution. Bombay or Silicon Valley?
Bombay.
Bombay. So do you hire for skill or for attitude?
Attitude.
Attitude. Manas, hire for attitude always. Huh? Big exit or building a legacy brand? What do you prefer?
Again, it depends a little bit. You're just moving cards, so I'm going to skip that question.
No, that
No,
is
I
what-
do want to build a legacy
Build a
brand.
legacy.
I do want to build a
Okay,
legacy.
building a legacy. Yeah, I mean, none of them are easy questions, so you have to just select one. Product market fit or product or founder market fit?
Founder, no.
Product market or founder market?
To invest in or to build in? Like
Okay, let's say invest in.
to invest in. Founder market fit.
Raise 100 million or impact 1 million lives?
I've seen both. So my first was the impact.
Impact,
Second has
okay.
been the raise.
Work-life balance, I mean, you've said work-life integration. So work-life balance or all in on work for a few years?
Integration always.
Integration. Public recognition or private satisfaction?
Private satisfaction.
India first or global first?
India first.
India first. And I had put Mark Zuckerberg and then noticed that you've met him already, so I cancelled it. If you have a chance to meet either of these two, Elon Musk or Kailash Satyarthi, who's the Nobel Prize winner.
Of course. Honestly, at this point in time, Kailash Satyarthi, I'm not very happy. This is a lot of.
And a last one. Next life, you want to become a VC or a founder?
I will always be a founder.
Always be a founder. Give her a big round of applause.
Thanks, Ninad.
No one wants to become a VC in the next life, so it will be a lonely.
No, we all respect VCs very much. Anybody in the audience, but it's a lot of joy building.
Thank you again for coming. You know, this is my second fireside with her. Unplanned it was this time, but I truly enjoy chatting with her. Thank you again for
Likewise,
coming.
Ninad.
Thank
Over
you.
to Pushkar.
Thank you very much, sir. Requesting you to please felicitate Naya ma'am with a memento. Over to you, sir, for a conference quick wrap up.
Thank you. So food is served. That means it's. I have to ensure that everything closes. And fortunately, you're exactly on time. I really love to run my events on time. This time I could do it, but I think we had a great panel discussion. Both the panels had great panelists, moderator. Topics were great, and as usual, Naya gave some very interesting comments. I'm so glad we stepped out of just startups, entrepreneurship, discussed some, very, very issues of very wide nature. And I'm really happy we managed to discuss some issues which are outside of syllabus, so to say. But I'm also glad she didn't ask me any questions. She threatened she would ask me, but you'll have to wait 12 months from now. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for coming for this Startup Summit. We've tried a new model of starting at 4:30 rather than starting in the morning and going on till 3 o'clock. I think a lot of you people have given good feedback. So hopefully we'll do that. Keep coming to such events. If you participate, you give thought leadership, it always helps, not only for you, but for us as well. So thank you again. And with that, we close the summit, and it's over to the best part of the summit, which is dinner. Thank you.